Recording in progress.
Good evening. I'd like to call to order our city council meeting. Today we're having a meeting of the session of the whole. We have council members Whitelock, Green, McConaughey, Bloom, and Jacob. He'll be back momentarily. And we have council member Worthen online. With the call to order, it's not called out on the agenda, but we'd like to start with a pledge, which will be led by Mr. Anderson.
Thank you. Everyone, please rise. Repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
All right, and Councilmember Pack has joined us as well. We've got a number of discussion topics for tonight. We don't really have anything on here for housekeeping. There was one housekeeping item I wanted to hit on real quick. Councilmember Green or Councilmember Whitelock, could you give a quick 30-second overview of I wish you could read my mind. The station area plans that there had been conversation about doing with other cities and coordinating. I heard from Mr. Anderson this week that there was a request to have chair and vice chair meet with them, but rather than having things switched up. Anyway.
So is that a question?
Could you give 30-second background as to what that was? I don't.
Oh, I think it was in a committee of the whole that we talked about having, that we wanted to, what I recall is we wanted to work in conjunction with South Jordan and with Midvale because we overlap on those. And then my understanding was that we were going to, I think, apply for a grant or something, somehow get some money somewhere to hire someone together. And that we would work with them to come up with those stationary plans that are required.
And what was relayed to me was they were looking to meet with chair and vice chair. Rather than switch up and have us start or something else. I want to know if the two of you wanted to continue with that, if you wanted to have the land use committee do that, how would you like to proceed?
We haven't met really.
No, we
so
never started.
The first meeting's supposed to be this coming week.
I would be happy to serve on that. I don't.
Yeah, so would I.
Okay. Is the council okay if they continue with that, continue with that? I don't see any objections.
Pamela, you want to? You're you gonna go?
I mean, I can go if you want me to, or it's up to you guys. I don't mind. I have nothing going on that day, so I can
Yeah,
absolutely.
neither
come
do
by.
I. Let's talk
Yeah,
afterwards.
that's fine. That's
Okay.
good.
Okay.
I just want to make sure that if there's any assignments that are going to
Okay.
be representing the council, that it's clear who is speaking for the council there.
Can I find out the date of that?
Oh, the 26th. We don't have a time yet, though.
Okay.
I can get you the details when I get that from Taylor.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Now for discussion topics. First up, ordinance 23-02 with third-party charitable or educational service entities obtaining financial or in-kind assistance from the city. Mr. Anderson.
Thank you, Council. Excuse me. Back in April, there was a presentation made by the Cultural Arts Society of West Jordan. Members of the council had expressed some different options to be able to engage with them. That used to be the, what do we call it, the Arts Society of West Jordan, or the Arts Council that was run by the city. They've since gone on their own and become a 501c3. I worked with, at your request, I worked with Mr. Tingy, who is the attorney over this aspect of the code. This is in section 263, and in the request for council action, in the request for council action, he listed in the executive summary on the letters 2A, B, and C in bold some concerns that the code has that puts a burden on the city. And I see Jared in the video, but I'm going to have him come up here because he'll have to talk too. and answer questions. So we worked on this on behalf of the city council. Currently, the code says the city finance department shall inspect the system of accounts and other accounting systems and protocols being used by third-party tax-exempt service entities. And then it goes on to further say, and only when and if the finance department is satisfied with such systems will the finance department initial a proposal. In B, it talks about, in 2B in the code, talks about if the entity has no formal place of business, such books and records shall be brought to the city's offices for audit. There's some concerns with that as it which Mr. Tingy indicated. If there's a lot of books that they have, if they're quite a large organization, it also can bring up some concerns if there's some confidential information in those books. And then the city now is in possession of those books for safekeeping for an audit. The other one is, do you really want the city to audit external entities? In 2C of the RCA, the request for council action, the proposing entity shall have a track record of successfully employing city resources, which kind of limits the city in doing business with new entities that may come up. So there's some proposals in here in the red line that you see, and why we're here today in this work session is to go through this with you, see if there's any concerns that you have. Mr. Tingy feels that these amendments need to be made if the council desires to enter into a contract with the Cultural Arts Society of West Jordan and other third-party nonprofit entities. And he kind of listed the concerns down in, I think all in E, third paragraph, very bottom of the first page of the RCA. The finance department, I don't think, has the human capital to be able to perform all of these inspections and accounting systems and protocols of third-party entities amidst all their other duties within the city. And it's just changing the word shall to may. And then, and I'm going off of the original Exhibit A in the RCA. Councilmember Green also submitted a substitute, and we can talk about that in a minute.
Yep, I'd like to.
But in the red line of Exhibit A to Ordinance 2302, under line 25, instead of proposals, change it to applications. There's an application process that would occur. Instead of going to the city administrator, the applications would come to the council office. In 263, line 39, changes shall to may, leave the opportunity there for the finance department, who can inspect if they feel it's needed. And delete the text on 41 and 42, and only when and if the finance department is satisfied with such systems. Again, changing on line 46 from the shall to may, deleting lines 48 and 49, and then changing the letters to make the code consistent. So really minor changes, but Mr. Tingy feels that these are necessary, which would allow the city to look at new organizations who may want to seek out assistance with the council. It allows the city, if there's a concern by the finance department, that they can look at the accounting systems. The last thing that it does is, there's three. I can't remember the third one. Anyway, well, changing it to applications and coming through the council office rather than the administration. So I have Mr. Tingy here to answer any legal questions. Councilmember Green has submitted a substitute which reduces the language, the text even more. I don't know if, Sheriff, you would like to go to that one yet, or see if anybody has comments on this Exhibit A.
Council, thoughts, comments?
Let me, if you don't mind, let me just throw out, I went through this, and I actually talked to Mr. Tingy about this afterwards, and he goes, and he told me, so I'm gonna throw you under the bus a little bit, Jared. He didn't want to make as many substantial changes, fearing that in a lot of places, minor changes are better to get past council. And I told him, we like the liberal use of the delete key. So let me just give you a couple of things about mine. What I did, instead of changing it, instead of talking about charitable or educational purposes, changed the name to outside organizations for city corporate purposes because that's the language in 10.8, that's the language in municipal code 10.8.2. We can spend money on any corporate purpose we want. It's whether or not we have to do a 10.8.2 study or not, and whether we get our quid pro quo or whether we can waive it if they're a nonprofit. So that's more consistent with the code. In 261, it really just says we can spend money and got it down to the short version. The thing that I really focused on and wanted to try to incorporate policy with practice is that instead of having the city finance office have the ability at all to audit books, do what we're going to do with the Cultural Arts Society of West Jordan and say, here's the report, fill it out, and we'll just and so what I did was deleted the two big paragraphs of having the city staff be able to audit the report and just say that the organization that we give the money to just has to complete a report that's acceptable to the city council. We negotiate that report, we know what we're going to get, and then we don't have to worry about auditing the books all the time. So that was really the main reason with what I did was just try to simplify this, make it more consistent with code, and make it more consistent with our practice instead of saying, well, the city finance office can audit it, but we're just going to ask for a report anyway. And then we do the report. So that's where that came from. So either one, so that's where I came from with this particular amendment.
Councilmember Whitelock.
I wonder, Chair, if we could, I've read through both. I agree with Kelvin. I like simplifying, especially for something like this that is really for outside entities to read and try to understand. I would propose that we send Kelvin's back to Mr. Tingy and ask him to review it and bring it back to us based on, our attorney's input as well for us to look at. The only thing that I do want still in here is I do want that our finance department has the authority to ask for and audit their books if they choose. Because if we have a feeling that something's amiss, I want us to have that ability.
So
Those are my thoughts.
can I ask you a question on the audit? Do we want the city finance department to be able to audit it? Or do we require an outside auditor to do that? If we think there's something wrong, we make them pay for an outside audit.
Both options.
Yeah, I think both.
We gotta shake.
I want our finance department to have the authority to do it, but that they could also then ask for an outside audit.
Options.
So
Yeah.
both options.
Yeah.
So I like the idea. There's a couple things that I had questions on in here. First of all, does anybody mind if we go to, oh, sorry, I didn't see your light. Councilmember Pat.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chair. Yes, so I always like looking at this from a different way because I know sometimes we mince over the words. So what I did is I had about a 2-hour conversation with Vic Groves in person last night because I know a lot of what we're talking about is happening because of these autonomous entities that we still support. They want some level of autonomy, but then they're counting on us for support, but we're saying, well, you need to be autonomous because that's what you wanted to do. And I think it'd be helpful if we look at it from the other point of view as an applicant or an organization trying to receive support from us, because I know, all frustration stems from unmet expectations, and a lot of times there's not the understanding of, well, what should the entity be doing? What should we be doing? So instead of so much thinking about the wording of this, I was just reaching out to try to see, well, what are the frustrations? What could we do better on? And it might help, not saying that we need to do this right now or with everything, but to get some feedback from some people that are on these outside entities, specifically the West Jordan Cultural Arts Society, since that's a main entity that is precipitating this discussion. To ascertain, exactly what the frustration is. So that's why I talked to him. And so no matter what language we put in there, if there can be a point of contact so that these entities that we're trying to support can call and get clarification and get feedback. I think that would help, because I know that there's been frustration on the council where we said, hey, we want some reporting, and then they come back with a report. Well, that's not the reporting that we wanted, because understandably, some of these leaders of these organizations aren't necessarily CPAs or accountants or know how to write a business report. So that's just the feedback that I would say is, yes, I think it's important, the conversation we're having on what verbiage to put in the code. But let's also make sure that it's not just a static document, that we actually have someone that they can reach out to say, hey, what does this mean? So, thank you.
Why
Awesome.
wouldn't
Thank
that
you.
be why wouldn't that be the council office? Because that's the point of contact for where the fee waiver, where the request for funds and the fee waivers start.
So long as the entity representative knows who to contact, and also our contact doesn't send them somewhere else saying, well, I don't know about that. That's a good question. Let me send you somewhere else. So yeah, it just depends on who we want to designate, and are they going to be the arbiter of all wisdom regarding the questions on what to do. So just wanted to mention that there was a really insightful conversation last night. Thank you.
Thank you. I think I like the way we've started with the way Councilmember Green has started with this one. I like that it's providing the framework without getting too much into the specifics of what's being requested, because in addition to groups like Cultural Arts Society of West Jordan, we've also got South Valley Sanctuary. We've got Jordan Education Foundation. We work with Jordan School District, Chamber West. We have a lot of others. So there needs to be some flexibility for the type of request that's coming through and the scale. Is this just a little group that's wanting to do a fun run, or is this something more substantial? So I think, Councilmember Pavick, I think your comments are very applicable for how we actually execute this. And I like Councilmember Green, how you put this together to start with. I do have a couple questions on here. First question, you kind of touched on, Councilmember Green. I wasn't sure exactly what was meant by corporate purpose. I was wondering, are there other purposes? Do we need the word corporate? But then you pointed to the 1082, and that kind of made sense. But just from my understanding, what type of purposes does the city have in addition to corporate purposes?
All of our purposes are corporate, aren't they, Jared?
Yes, everything that will come through the council is a corporate purpose, or at least
Okay.
can be arguably a corporate purpose.
Sounds good.
So from my perspective, when I was looking at the old ordinance, it talked about, it used the terms health, safety, and welfare.
Right.
Or something.
That's
Well,
why I say
what does Chamber West I'll pick on Chamber West. Does it actually help with the health, safety, and welfare of West Jordan? No, it supports the business and
The welfare.
well, but it really supports the business types of things. So
Corporate. Okay.
it's a corporate it's one of the city's purposes and not just some narrowly defined thing, if that made sense.
That works. If all of our purposes are corporate,
But
so
I think you bring up a good point. So maybe in parentheses, this helps us legally. It clarifies what it really is. But if I'm wanting to do a fun run or something in the city, I'm not going to know to look at outside organizations for city corporate. I'm going to think, oh, it took me here, but where do I really need to be? So maybe we need to, in brackets, have something that's a little more friendly to the general public.
or on the form that they used to apply, or something to help guide them.
Yeah.
The second question I had was next line down, row 21. We're talking about relationship to the city. The city does not manage or control the outside entity. There are a number of entities where there's a member of the city council or the mayor who sits on the board. Does that cause an issue? I mean, we're not directly controlling, but we are influencing. We have some say in how they're controlled. So that kind of raised a yellow flag. I kind of want to call on Mr. Quayle for this one, since he's already got his foot sort of halfway out the door, if we can suck him back in for a little bit.
Fair enough. Just as though one council member does not control the council, the mayor or one council member sitting on an outside board would not control that board or that entity. They'd be a single member of it. Wouldn't control it. The body would act, the board of directors or whatever that may be.
Okay, so we don't need to worry about that.
And you know what's ironic is that I'm just going to make this because it's an observation. That's actually the old wording. There's actually some of that old wording in the ordinance, I thought. But what's funny is that that's the reason why we need to rethink and redo ordinances all the time. It's just so we can relook and talk about those kind of things.
Beautiful. Is there anything else that's needed anything else anyone wants to share on this item? I'm not seeing any lights. Is there anything else, Mr. Anderson, that you need to?
I just
Move on.
want to, just to clarify, there's support of the council to use Councilmember Green's substitute Exhibit A to move forward. Would you like to bring it back to a work session, or would you like us to bring a polished version back to a future council meeting?
I say polished version to a council.
Your mic's not on.
Polished version to a council meeting is what I'd support.
I can be supportive of that if we don't think we're going to wordsmith on the dais. If everyone's comfortable with what they've read in this one. Otherwise,
I agree with Councilmember Whitelock.
Okay, I did notice there's a couple places where the word city should probably be capitalized, so I'll just sound that out now. And
well,
then-
and there's also somewhere where it repeats a word that it shouldn't.
Yeah.
Okay,
But I do like Kayleen's idea of something in parentheses or something else that talks about maybe fee waivers or support to outside groups or something like that that would help somebody know what they're looking at. I do agree with
and
that.
language that doesn't diminish the
Yes.
protection this provides to the
No
city.
offense, but not lawyerese, okay?
Okay,
Okay, thank you. I'll work with Mr. Tingy to bring that back to you as soon as we can.
just for fun, I'll call out that this one had suggested 5-minute presentation, 10-minute conversation, where it's 17 total. So pretty close, not bad. Okay, next item.
Can I say you're welcome?
If we were at 12 minutes instead of 17, yes.
Okay.
Next item, ordinance 23-03, which talks about uniformity with Utah State Code. Again, Mr. Anderson.
Yes, thank you, Chair. These next two items on the work session agenda are bringing us into compliance with state code. These are really kind of, I'm going to call them minor fixes, but does bring us into compliance. So this one is the waiver of fees, doubtful accounts, compromise of claims by or against the city. As you're well aware, as we've discussed the fee waiver process, any fee waiver is under the purview of the city council. And so this, line 16 through 29 talk about what the definitions are of allowed transactions. 30 through 59 talk about the allowed transactions for the mayor. I think if I have this one right, where did I go? There we go. So city mayor authority on line 31, city mayor have authority to waive any penalty, settle monetary obligations, rectify an alleged error. City council authority on 37 with 1082 and Title II, Chapter 6 of our code. City council has authority to waive any service fee, provide monetary or non-monetary assistance to a nonprofit entity, which we just talked about. And then a report to the city council on 342, the mayor designee shall provide an annual report to the city, which is in our current code, with some changing in wording at 63 through 66. The mayor shall also provide the council an annual report of any claims or settlements and the amounts paid or received.
So, Mr. Tingy and I, over the last 2 days, have talked about this extensively, and Denise, I'm going to get you to jump in here in a minute. I want to focus specifically, well, I've got two comments. One, I'd like the "and" out of line 44 taken out and just say we can waive any service fee and then provide monetary, so that it's not we waive services and provide money. We can waive service fees or we can provide money, but we change the "and" or just take it out. So line 44 I'd like to look at, or just take a look at the grammar there for legislative purposes. Here's what I am proposing, and I didn't get to do this in writing. What I would like to do is strike on line 34, everything, on line 34 and line 35, everything after 9-8-5. The city, we've had this long discussion. The mayor has clear authority to settle claims and lawsuits under the Utah Governmental Immunity Act. What is doubtful under the code, and the code is very unclear, and after a couple of hours of discussion, both Jared and I came to the conclusion that the code is very unclear. But I talked to our finance director yesterday. By the way, she's a superstar. Mayor, you have to do whatever you need to do to keep her. But based on some of our discussions today with Jared, I reached out, and it's a good thing that my son knows people. If you didn't know, my son used to be the attorneys for the constitutional officer, so he knows John Dougal. So we called John today in the state auditor's office, who referred my son to a very specific person, and I called him. And what was funny is when I called the state auditor's office to say, how do you write off debts in a city with the doubtful and uncollectible accounts? He gave me almost word for word what Denise had given me the day before. So Denise is a rock star. What I'm proposing is that we strike out the words after 985, and that it's lines 33 and 34 and 35. It says, oh, is it 9? Oh, sorry, maybe it's a 9. I got a squiggly mark over the top of it.
Or any way we can keep this stuff on the screen so that we don't have to keep trying to follow along and figure out where people are jumping around to? I don't know. Just thought we often have stuff on the screen.
Anyway, what I'd like to do is strike after the 989, leave C and say rectify an alleged error up to, and we need to decide a dollar amount that will allow the mayor to rectify an alleged error. And then add D that says that the city treasurer will compile a list of doubtful and uncollectible accounts and present them to the council every 6 months and the procedure would be on a consent calendar, but that the city treasurer would provide a list of the the doubtful and uncollectible accounts every 6 months for the council to approve those being written off. Denise, do you want to make any comments on that? On why that's a good practice?
So that is a good practice just because of it spreads the responsibility of writing off any uncollectible or doubtful accounts over many instead of leaving that pressure on the one. Especially as an elected official, if someone comes to him and says, I can't pay this bill for the last 6 months, you're going to turn off my water. Coming to the mayor, it makes him the responsible party in that particular person's eyes instead of putting it on a report that the council would then write off. It would not typically be somebody that's actively in our community. Usually they will have moved because we will have shut off their utilities otherwise. But it definitely would be the best. I'm sorry? But ambulance fees would be another one. It takes the onus off one and spreads it among the many. So it makes it much more transparent and much more uninfluential for one person. Every 6 months. Yes, we're good with every 6 months. We may bring it to you earlier, but 6 months tended to be something that felt reasonable for my staff to manage. We meet with Gold Cross Ambulance once a quarter about some of the doubtful or uncollected accounts. So we'll just accumulate those and then put them through.
Okay. I've got a couple thoughts, but first, anybody else want to chime in?
I just have a clarifying question. So it will come to a consent agenda. And if we vote yes, we're voting on saying they don't need to pay? Is that basically what we're doing that way?
Yes.
So what if we're not okay with that?
Then we
What's
would
the
pull it off the
process?
consent agenda and then you could amend it.
Okay. And what kind of how much information will be on that report? Like an ambulance fee of $1,200 and who the person was and why they can't pay it, or just their name and the dollar amount?
It will be the name and the dollar amount, and then how long it has been delinquent, and what methods we have used to try and collect. So it would be, we went through property tax, we went through income tax, we went through a collection agency. This debt is now 5 years old, and we are recommending to the council to write it off at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I do like how some redundancy's been removed. Like if you're looking at lines 39 through 42, I like how we just cite code and then stop there, because if code changes in one place and then we have something over here that doesn't get updated, I'd like to try and avoid inconsistencies and just reference where we need to encode. Very much like that. And then as far as timing goes for what was proposed, rather than say it shall be like every 6 months, I'm wondering if no less frequently than once a year. That way it can come more often if needed, but we're getting it at least once a year in conjunction with updating annual reports and financials.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't see any objection. Is there any other comment from the council on this one? I'm going to be careful to remember Councilmember Worthman's on Zoom, check for anything from her. If not, Mr. Anderson, is there anything else you need from us on this one?
Wait, was there a dollar amount that we needed to agree on?
I'm thinking we need a dollar amount on line 36, rectifying alleged error. When I talked to the auditor's office today, that they typically, he used the county treasurer's rectifying errors on property tax, and he says typical, it's a $5 fix an error. I'm okay with more, but I do think that we probably ought to we need to give Denise and her staff, Tangi and her staff, the ability to rectify an error. I'm just wondering what the dollar amount is on an error on a billing that we can authorize the mayor's office to fix.
And then the other question I'd have is, Kelvin suggested getting rid of some words. Do we have 4 that want to get rid of those? Okay. So are we putting in a dollar amount?
My only concern about putting in as a dollar is we may have to adjust that periodically, depending on what side. I just want to make sure I'm making it work smarter, not harder on that. If we put a dollar on it, I just don't want us to have to keep going back to that.
And that's a wise idea. Hey Denise, what do you think, if we assigned a dollar amount to rectify errors, what dollar amount do you think is appropriate?
I just had this conversation with my treasurer. We do this daily, so I'm not sure how to manage this. I mean, we have a situation where someone has a leak and we billed them and we need to bring their water rate down to tier 1. That would be considered a billing error in some ways.
They're proposing granting that authority to keep doing that up to
Right, but
$10,000.
that's what I was gonna say. A year or per occurrence?
So do we
we
need
have-
to adjust the wording then and just keep
I mean,
it
you think
rectify
about
errors?
one of our staff members that had that water leak that we've heard about, that, they received a $5,000 bill and we wrote them down to tier 1 and the bill went down to $1,000. I mean, it's still extreme, but
Maybe we just leave it alone then.
we correct billing errors on a regular and daily basis, and I'm not sure if we could put a dollar amount on that.
I vote that we just keep it how it is, just to make it easier for them.
I'm okay with that then too.
I'm fine.
So does that mean remove the strike through on rows 38 through 42? Or just keep that dollar amount?
The dollar amount was in line 30. I was proposing a dollar amount in 36, but it doesn't look like we want to do that, so.
We just keep it.
Line 36 is fine,
No, we're still getting rid of this stuff.
but we're getting rid of everything after 9, 8, and 9 in lines 34 and 35.
Okay.
Is that right? Everybody okay with that?
Appears to be so.
And
And then
then
add that wording that, whatever we did, Jared, about that
what?
no
what
less
the
than
council-
once a year,
Right.
no less than once a year, council does the write-offs.
Okay. Mr. Anderson.
On this one, or I would like to get some direction from you to bring it back to a work session where we refined it, or bring it back to city council for action.
This action?
Yeah, I think this one's got a little more that we need to make sure there's, for action.
You can always move it to another council meeting if there's
Okay.
some tweaks that still need to be made.
Bring it back as if it's ready for action.
Okay,
No work session.
okay.
Okay.
And Melissa Worthen said, and I just lost it, she had a comment.
Yes on eliminating lines, no limit for Denise. Okay.
Thanks, Melissa. We're glad you're there.
All right. Next item is ordinance 23-04, discretionary authority of the mayor. Mr.
Okay.
Anderson.
Thank you, Chair. This one also is a really minor change on line 50. In this form of government, and I'll have Mr. Tingy correct me if I'm wrong, but this basically brings us into compliance with state law that the city remit all fine and forfeitures and ensure that they are processed properly. And changes the word ensure and all fines and makes it more readable. I don't know if Mr. Tingy has any comments.
Yeah, so 10.3B202 of the state code states that the mayor has authority to remit all fines and forfeitures. What was in our code prior to that only specifically called out the process by which those fines and forfeitures were removed to ensure that the process, ensure that all fines and forfeitures are processed properly. But 10.3B202 specifically calls out the mayor's authority to do so, not just the overview of ensuring the process is done correctly. So that puts it into conformity with Utah State Code.
And then the very end at 65, because we talked about fees being a council duty, a council responsibility, we delete fines and it's on line 61, the mayor may not line 65, waive any fees unless specifically authorized to do so.
So I just had a couple of comments that are extraneous to the change. And I'm wondering if in some of this, we couldn't simplify some of the wording in a couple of sections up, like in 175. And just see if we can't simplify the wording to say, here's what the mayor can do, without having to be overly redundant. So if you'll just maybe if we can just take a look at that as we bring it back. The one specific one that I would like to make sure that we highlight, it's line 45, and it says, subject to section 10.6.138. Can we make sure that that says Utah Code 10? Because when I started looking, that's like, wait a minute. Are we talking about our section, or am I going to the Utah Municipal Code? So I think we need Utah Code there for sure. And I'm just wondering if there's some of the things we can't just glump together. It's like, for example, in E and F, it says within the provisions of state and statute and ordinance, and F, it says subject to statute and ordinance. Why don't we just, someplace, just put within statute and ordinance, and then say through the city, and then have 1 as city administrator regulate and prescribe powers, 2 attend city council meetings, 3. So I'm just thinking about, is there a way to eliminate some redundant words? It's not necessary, but if we can clean this up a little bit while we're doing the section, let's see what we can do.
Just so you're aware, a lot of what this section, the wording of this section comes
Probably
straight from
10.8.
Utah Code.
Yeah.
So that's where the wording already comes from. But
If there's anything that's not in the code, the state code, that we can remove superfluous stuff, let's at least look at it.
okay,
I'm not saying you have to, but the one, I think, to refer to Utah Code, I think we definitely need to do that one. so we're not confused on what we're looking at.
All right, I'm not seeing any other lights. Is there anything else the council has to weigh in on this? Or Mr. Anderson, anything else that's needed to proceed?
Just to know if you would like me to bring it back to a work session not a work session, a council meeting for action.
I don't see any hands raised to have this exact same non-conversation in a work session, so let's put it on an agenda.
Okay, thank you.
I think we should not talk about things as often as possible.
Can we talk about that? All right, so moving on.
Thanks, Jared.
Discussion regarding construction alternatives of Community Arts and Event Center. We've been getting quicker and quicker and quicker on time. Let's see if this one holds trend.
That would be good. I would be very impressed.
I'd be concerned.
Before Corbin starts, may I say something?
Please, Mayor.
Thank you. On your last discussion too, I just want to know how that affects things like dumpster fees. You may want to make sure that's clear so we residents know how that works if they want a dumpster and want to have that fee adjusted.
Since it's a little less formal, let's back up to that. Mayor, do you want to talk about that for just a second or two then?
I just get requests for that frequently, quite often in the spring when neighborhoods want to do cleanup groups, or I've had occasions where families have had someone who passed away, they need to clean the house out, and they're looking for an option of doing a dumpster without having to pay the normal fees. And I'm not in a position to offer that to them. So I would like to see if you want to do that, would send them to you, or how you want to handle that.
So that's a little bit more than coming into conformity with state code. It would be granting additional authority to the mayor to help with some of those fees. Is that something that the council would like to consider with this? Something separate? Return?
Well, with the ordinance that we just talked about, this is the one that's in resolution 2303. That's the one that says that we're the ones that waive the fees. So the mayor's right. So I think what Councilmember Pack, along with what the mayor is saying, is that what we need to do is, as we deal with the fee waiver process, we just need to make sure that the fee waiver is consistent, that that if somebody comes into City Hall and says, I want a fee waiver for a neighborhood dumpster, that they know that the application goes to Alan and it comes to us almost immediately. Is that what I hear you saying, Mayor?
Right. For example, Jennifer Andelin, she's going to be contacting me again, as she does each year. And I would love to have a good answer for her sooner than later so she knows what to do. So are you going to create an application? Do you want us to create an application to send to you?
Well, I just want to add that when we originally had the dumpster discussion, we talked about ways that we wanted to allow neighborhoods. And so I think that's something that administration, what's come back is just dumpster days. But certainly in your budget, Mayor, you could bring some other idea back to us, right? For that, because I heard us discussing that we wanted a way for neighborhoods to be able to access. We wanted some parameters there, but we wanted a way for individual neighborhoods to have them come to them, not just come to the park. Is that what you remember?
Yeah, and it kind of goes to a broader theme of, as we're looking at some of these specific items, what's the best approach? Is it codify it here? Or through the budgeting process, do we say we allow a certain dollar amount of allowances that can be determined by the mayor's office and others are retained by the city? Is that doable, or do we need to look at?
But what you have to remember is that by statute, it's the council that waives the fees. Mayor can't waive a fee.
But if the council does that as part of the budget process and says, Mayor, here's an allowance, you can act administratively so they don't have to wait 2 weeks, or I guess 3 weeks to publish it, get it on an agenda, come to the council. We give you X amount of authority as part of the budgeting process. Because then it's still a council.
I think you're still in an iffy area because then the mayor has discretion over, using that money to waive a fee, and it's not the mayor's authority to waive a fee. I think we can create I think we can create a process that is very simple, that somebody wants to waive a fee, mayor says, go see Council Director Anderson, fill out an application, and it shows up in in our agenda in a couple of weeks. I mean, people may have to understand that it's gonna take, if, it might need a public hearing, but the fact of the matter is that no matter how we do it, we're giving away public money and not charging somebody public money for a fee that they get, and that's our role.
Jamie would like to make a comment. Is that okay, Chair?
Please.
If I may, perhaps council, I've seen in the past where, for example, a discretionary amount has been included in an operating budget. And if there is a nexus between community benefit and the request being made, then the mayor, for example, has the opportunity to use that budget line item as a means to accomplish some of what you're talking about. So, provided there is a community purpose and benefit to whatever is being requested, then it's not necessarily just a personal exemption or request for a fee waiver, but rather it serves the community good and therefore could potentially be permissible.
So I recognize Councilmember Jacobs got his light on. I'll let him speak real quick and then.
Just to the point of who gets to do what, I mean, the Constitution also says Congress gets to make laws, but tell that to regulatory agencies that make laws. We can delegate authority. We can delegate authority to the mayor. You may waive fees up to $1,000 a year, $20 an occurrence, whatever. We can do that.
Are you sure? Because the Utah code doesn't allow, it says the council waives fees and it doesn't say
We
you
do.
can delegate
We waive it
authority.
by statute. We waive it by statute. We say the council waives fees and allows whatever. It also says, it says a lot of things. We delegate authority to the planning commission.
So I think,
Lots
sorry.
of things. So anyway.
Councilmember Worthen did make the comment that the fee waiver needs to come to the council for the council to decide. Makes it more transparent to the public that way. My thought at this point is this is probably both the budget conversation and a conversation on its own. So, Mr. Anderson, we had talked about creating an issues log of different items we want to follow up with. Would you add fee waivers to that? And we'll talk about it and get it back to the council here shortly. Okay, so for real, let's talk about the Art Center now. Mayor.
I'm going to start and then turn it over to Corbin because he's got the brains of the information. Let me go back a little bit of history, my personal history. When I first moved into this city, I was contacted by the arts people, and there was this great big silo called Sugar Factory where they were doing some plays, and I donated some time and did some work for them there. And then someone had discovered that was an unsafe building, and they tore it down. And I remember hearing in a city council meeting that they said, "Don't worry, we'll make sure we take care of you and we'll get you another place to meet." Soon after that, they bought the old library over on 7800 South and told the arts people they could go in there and participate and use that building. And the arts people moved in there and looked at it and saw some things that needed to be done and asked the city if they could raise the ceiling and do some things and put in a stage. And the city said, "Oh, wait, we just meant for you to do rehearsals in there and store your stuff in there. We'll get you a different building to meet in." And they said, okay. So they started getting ready to set up and do rehearsals. And they discovered there were lots of other problems with the building, and they were told they couldn't meet in that building even for rehearsals and practices. And pretty soon they were told to come out, and the city sold that building and said, "Don't worry, we will get you a new building with the money we sold from that building and some property that we'll sell and a couple of things like that." And so the arts people got excited at seeing that would go forward. And then we got these great plans for a building, and the location was over there on 78th across the street from the library in the park area. We had a groundbreaking, passed out shovels. Those shovels are still out in the community, and they were all excited. We're finally getting this great nice arts building to go forward. And then the city came back and said, oh, whoops, sorry, we can't do that after all because there's a UDOT easement there and we can't put that building there. But don't worry, we'll take care of you. We'll get you a building and we just need to find another spot for it because we've got everything set up for you. And so the council looked for a location and came up with this spot now that we had been talking about, which is over by the swimming pool. And everyone thought that was a great spot because Sugar Factory fits in that location. And they were all excited that we were going to put a building there. But as we looked at that, we saw that we didn't have enough money to build the other plan of the building we had before. So we came back with some new plans with a smaller size building and got that approved, and the council approved it unanimously. We're getting ready to go forward. And then as that time came, I became mayor, and I got ready and told Corbin to get things together, and he got prices and everything ready to go. We were ready to pull the trigger and go forward on it, and COVID came. And the county came in and said, whoops, sorry, that $2 million we're going to give to you, we're not going to give to you because we don't know what COVID's going to do, so we're putting it all on hold. So I came and talked to you, and the council said, yeah, let's put it on hold and let's wait till we get the $2 million back. So we put it on hold. The money's still sitting there out in the great blue yonder there somewhere, minus the $2 million. COVID's done its thing, and I was going to say run its course, but it really hasn't, but it's done its thing and fouled up all of our lifestyles. And we got back moving forward, and the county said, okay, here's your $2 million back. We said, thank you, we're so excited to have that $2 million back. And then we looked at some prices, and the price had shot up a whole lot more than that. And we thought, oh, we can't make this work now. Now what are we going to do? We need more money. So we went back to the county, asked for more money, and the county gave us some more money. And we thought, that's great, but it's still not enough to do it. So we talked to the arts people and said, will you help us raise some money? And I talked to a couple other people, and they said, yeah, we'll help you get some money. But the long and the short story is we still don't have enough money there. So if we get some donations money and we pull some reserve, we could make that happen, but that's something that the council would have to approve to do that. As I look at this has gone through multiple councils and has changed and morphed over the times. And had we done the first one, had the UDOT situation not been there, we'd have an arts building. If we would have gone forward not knowing what COVID would have done, we'd have an arts building. But we didn't do those things, and we don't have an arts building. And I've talked to the council several times. I've called each of you personally a few times over this. And now the council used to be unified. The whole council said yes a couple of different times on this. But the last couple of times I've got the feedback is some council members have wanted to look at different options. I was concerned about looking at different options. I didn't want to look at different options. But the council members were deliberate that that's what they wanted to do. So I went ahead and authorized Corbin to look at some different options, which he will share with you today. And I was talking to West Valley, and they've got this great campus over there now with that hotel in there where we just met over there, and some other buildings they put together. And Corbin was asking them about that. What's that experience like there? They said it was really tough because we went through multiple councils, and we had to keep them. They had to stay on track, and if another council decided to change their mind, it makes it difficult. And I'll look at things in history, and when we make things happen, it was when someone makes a decision, and later on we honor that decision, we keep it going and make it happen at a later time. That's how things get done over multiple years, and great things. And it's true, we could build, bring in a mobile home and put in, I know no one's asked for that, I'm being extreme here, and put that in there and start doing arts in a mobile home. And we could say, yeah, we have an arts building now, or a community center, whichever you want to call it. And we look at different communities and we say, we want to be like that community. They have all these really cool things. And then we come back here and say, well, we don't have the money that community has, so we're going to build it down to something smaller and lesser. As Corbin presents these other options to you, go ahead and listen to them. My desire, but you got to make the choice. I'm looking for direction from the council. We have some promises we've made to our community. I think we should keep those promises and provide them with the art center that we told them that we would do for them. you have the right to decide what that's going to be, and I would like to know what you want to do so I can make it happen. So you're going to get presented with three choices here. The first one is to go with the building that we had already have the plans for and designed for and the bids for, and go forward and make that happen. We don't have enough money for that right now. I would pull in some donations that I could do. I would ask the arts people, and they've committed that they would pull in some donations they can do. And then we would need to end up pulling some money from our general revenue funds. Or we could do a smaller building. One of them that he's going to talk about is just a plain square box that could be added onto later that we could grow into, and we could get something going that way and get started and go forward and do that. Or another option that a council member suggested is taking the senior center and remodeling that and putting the theater inside of there. So those are the three options you're going to hear. And then after this is done with that, it would be great if we could go back to where we were before with the council and you're unified with the decision, and give me some direction so I can know what you'd like to have happen. With that, Corbin, take it away, please.
Thank you. Good background, Mayor. Thank you. All right, will you go to the next slides? So just a few images to go with the mayor's history. In 2019, we started the process of redesigning a simplified version of the Community Arts Center. Smaller, 200-seat theater, raked floor, fixed seating. These are the images. Keep going. We designed this working with Method Studio and Construction Control Corp. We had a budget at the time of $8 to $8.5 million, and we had the plans, we have the construction drawings all completed, and the general contractors pre-selected. We were ready to put it out to bid with the final pre-selected contractors right when COVID hit. This is the building to be sited as it was to take advantage of the existing parking field, add to that parking field a little bit, put it next to the swimming pool for maximum efficiency on the site development costs. Go one more. So it mentioned that was done from about September 2019 until March of 2020. As we were ready to pull the trigger, we were within budget, and we thought we would get good bids. COVID happened. As the mayor mentioned, everything got hit on pause. The county pulled the TRCC grants back. And 2.5 years later, that estimated budget on that same exact building went from $8 to $8.5 million to $12.5 million. That's where we stand today. We have not updated that cost estimate since last July, but in July the cost estimate was $12.5 million. Currently, we have about $6 million set aside of our own funds and a $2 million TRCC grant. So we have a gap of about $4.5 million that the mayor mentioned we would have to be the fundraiser for, be the backstop for, etc. Go ahead, keep going. This building has a lot of pros and cons. As the mayor mentioned, we want to consider a couple of alternatives, the senior center or a simplified building design. I want to mention also, we have looked at and explored lots of other options over the past 3 years with, can we convert retail space? Can we convert a vacant building? Can we buy this old church and make it a community arts center? Can we partner with the schools? We looked at options among all those areas, and all of those had pretty significant drawbacks. So we didn't bring any of those forward. These alternatives are our latest thinking of possible pros and cons. So with building the full building and biting the bullet on the cost of building the full building as designed, right now it's already designed. We've spent about $500,000 getting to this point with this building. But we have current completed construction drawings, we have building permits, we're ready to go. It would be the quickest way to get started. of the alternatives between a simplified building, the senior center addition, or building, this is the best performing arts space. This is a space certainly that's most desired by the community arts groups because it's the completed building. This building also has some potential for earned revenue. Now, to be clear, I do not think this building will earn enough revenue to pay for itself operationally, but I do think it has much better potential for earned revenue than the other alternatives. And this is the building, this is the design for which we got the county TRCC grants. If we do other alternatives, that grant could be jeopardized. We have to go back and reapply in the county. We've done that already a few times on this project, gone back and reapplied. And I think the county is very sensitive to that. This is a fully designed building. It's aesthetically pleasing. This building might have a better opportunity for naming rights or sponsorship or fundraising than some of the other versions. And it does have a multi-purpose room, the performance space, and the lobby. So it's a flexible building in terms of doing art showings, receptions, and performances. It's a nice space, and this building was designed in a way that could be added on to in the future with additional phases. Go ahead, Cassidy. The biggest con of all with this, the drawback with this plan, is that funding gap, $4.5 million. We can go out and work to fundraise, but the city will ultimately have to be the backstop on that funding gap. Of the alternatives as well, this is a brand new completed building. It's a full building, so it'd have the highest ongoing costs associated with it, the operating expenses. And the fixed seating and the raked floor means we have a large performing arts space. It's the best performing arts space, but it is just a performing arts space. You wouldn't have a luncheon, you wouldn't have a convention or other uses in that space. Cassidy, will you keep going? Next slide, please. The mayor mentioned two other alternatives we looked at. One was expanding the senior center, and two was doing a very simplified building. Expanding the senior center, we considered a couple of options with the senior center. First option would be to take the existing auditorium and extend it and put a stage behind it. As we considered this, I think most of you have seen this consideration before. We've even talked about could you possibly make a stage reversible and put an amphitheater out the back. This is one of the options we considered. Go to the next slide. The second option we considered is could we add on to the senior center off the southwest end of the senior center and have the entry come from the parking area where the current billiards room is, and put a stage and auditorium there on the corner. Now, to be clear on this option, this would require a change in the zoning. The setbacks, as you see, that west corner of the building gets really right up to the sidewalk and would almost have to be a zero lot line setback in order to squeeze in some kind of stage and auditorium space there. Go ahead to the next slide. Now, in terms of looking at expanding the senior center and considering whether we could do this as an alternative, there were some good options to this alternative. First, we think we could do some kind of expansion here within the money we've got, $6 to $8 million. Also, this is a building that we're already paying to heat, we're paying to cool, we're paying for the janitorial service on this building already. Now, to be clear, if we expanded this building and we use this building in the evenings as well as during the days, there would be added cost, but it would be the lowest marginal added cost for operations of the three alternatives. And also, something I really like is this is a public building that shuts down every day at 5 o'clock or 4 o'clock. The community arts center would largely be use in the evenings, and so it takes an existing building and just extends the life and use of that building into the evening hours. Next slide. However, this alternative is very, very expensive on a per square foot basis. What I mean by that is you would spend $6 to $8 million and not really add a lot of square footage to the senior center. That $6 to $8 million, major portions of that budget would be spent just relocating existing mechanical, a few things like that. There's also major design trade-offs and major architectural square peg and a round hole kind of situations with this alternative. In any way we looked at it, it was going to be a bit awkward to lay out an expansion because the senior center was never designed with this in mind in the first place. As you know, the county, we own the building. We pay to heat it, we pay to cool it, we pay to clean it, but we do not operate the building. We have an operation contract with the county and they run the building. They operate out of it, and if we were to use the building further, we would have to get the county's permission. And that's in addition to going back and getting their permission on the TRCC grant as well. We'd have to go re-ask on that. And so we couldn't do this, any kind of expansion with the senior center without major support from the county. To that said, I do think it's a challenge to have two different entities operating the same building as well, to have the county run the building during the day and the city run the arts programming in the evening. I think that leads to some possible challenges. This alternative has lower possibility for earned revenue. I just don't think it's quite as friendly for renting out as the other full design building. And certainly it's a disruption to the seniors and the operations of the current senior center. This building does not provide space for rehearsal or storage in any way, and it doesn't allow for any possible future expansions. Go ahead and go to the next slide. One of the other alternatives we considered is just, can we take the plan, can we take the building and dramatically simplify it to the point that we can get it within budget, and then allow for future expansion? So take the existing site, take just a very square box, very simple architecture, add in a restroom in the corner, a front lobby up front. Next slide. So it's, you know, it's architecturally something like that, with the dark blue being restrooms, the teal color being a lobby, and the light blue being the space. And the space would be a big, kind of a black box space, or just a big square shell, very simple architecture, perhaps tilt-up concrete or other simple construction methods. And then the arts groups, whoever wants to use that space, fills it in and customizes it for each show. We believe we could get a building like this within our $6 to $8 million budget, but we have not costed that out. It would be very, very simple, but go ahead to the next slide. We could do something like this and then add on to it in the future. So in other words, this would become future rehearsal space or future multi-purpose space if we wanted to add a more formal performing arts space adjacent to it in the future. So so it could be used in its square kind of black box format, as well as a more formal performing arts center in the future. Next slide. The pros and cons for this very simplified building design. Like I said, we believe, we have not costed this out, but we believe we could do a very, very simple building within that $6 to $8 million budget. And it would allow for a future expansion of the Community Arts Center. In other words, it keeps our options open. We could expand it. We could expand it to the west, to the east. It would also serve multiple purposes because it wouldn't be dedicated formal performance space. The good and bad of that is it's open for opportunities like luncheons, like support for the Western Stampede Rodeo, miscellaneous events, convention events, and performances, but it's not a dedicated performance space only. So in that regard, it expands the facility capabilities within our community. It can be kind of hard to find just big open space in our community right now other than the Veridian Center. this would have lower operating costs than the full community arts center because it's a much simpler building. But it also, I believe, has less possibility for earned revenue. Now, that said, that's kind of a two-edged sword, right? There's less pressure to rent it out every night to cover the higher operating costs. As there's less pressure to rent it out every night, we're not going to stress out if the community arts groups rehearse in the space leading up to a performance. Whereas in the main performing arts center as designed, really, we don't want groups rehearsing in that space often because we want to utilize that space for performances as much as possible. This simple building, it's very simple. There might be some limited options for rehearsal and storage. Go to the next slide. But that's probably a drawback as well as a pro and a con, right? Very limited options for rehearsal and storage and limited options for earned revenue. It's not aesthetically pleasing as the original full building. It's a simple architecture. You know, we could put a storefront on the front. We could clean it up so it's presentable from the front, but it wouldn't look good from the back. But it's a big square box. So as a square box, there's some challenges. You know, theater groups that have to perform in black box type of space, they have some added challenges that you'd have to deal with, light lock and acoustical issues and some of those kinds of things. It's also, I mentioned Viridian earlier, it's kind of duplicative of the Viridian Center space nearby. The Viridian Center space is essentially a big square box ballroom space. This is not very different. This very simplified design is not what we applied for the TRCC grant money with. So if we chose this as the alternative, we would have to go back to the county and try to get that grant money again, and that's not a guarantee. So it does jeopardize that $2 million. Okay, go ahead, go to the next slide. So with that, I see that there's kind of 4 alternatives here. We can proceed with the construction of the full performing arts center. As the mayor mentioned, that's his preference. However, to do that, we would need to be the backstop on any remaining gap in funding. That could be as high as, you know, that could be as high as an additional $4.5 million. Well, right now, you're saying or 6. Right now, we have that $2 million grant from the county. We have our 6 plus $4.5 million. Is that what you meant? Yes. Okay. Yep. Yeah. Our 6 that we're already contributing, and an additional 4.5 on top of that. That's the first alternative, is proceed with the full performing arts center, get going on it. We have not done that heretofore because we've not made the decision to fully fund it. Secondly, we could, I say proceed with intent to add to the senior center. In other words, we have not formally further studied the senior center option. We've looked at it, we've walked it, we talked to our construction guys about it, but we've not tried to work it out with an architect. We've not talked to the county about it. If that were the preferred alternative, it would take a lot of work to start new design and to talk to the county and make sure they would be on board. We could also start the process with a simplified building design that would take some new design. We would start with architectural services, but it would be a simple building. Fourth, there's always the alternative of starting over from scratch or do nothing. I did not list do nothing as an alternative, but that is something is you can say, oh, we don't like any of these alternatives, throw it out and start from scratch. As we're starting to prepare the FY24 budget, and as we're coming into the next spring and summer season, it would be very helpful to kind of know the council's desires on this so we know whether to program this into the budget and get started with really planning our time and our efforts around pursuing aggressively one of these alternatives or putting it on hold. So with that, I'll seek input from the council and like to hear your opinions, thoughts, preferences, and I may come back and ask you to do some rank order or thumbs up, thumbs down voting.
Before we comment, Cassidy, can you go back to the simplified building design? That slide. Okay, yeah, just leave that there for a minute. Thank you.
So I saw Councilmember Whitelock, Councilmember Jacob, Councilmember Green, and we'll go that route.
Okay, thank you. Okay, a couple of things. None of our desire has never been for them to have storage on site. So that's kind of a moot point for me because that's not what has been our goal as a council, was to have the arts people have storage on site. So that line I think gets taken out.
The full building has very little storage,
It
which is
wasn't-
kind of a
it was for the
functional
city.
storage
Yeah,
space.
it was for the city. It wasn't for, so storage I don't really think should be a consideration. I had the great privilege of attending the fundraiser and many events that our arts people have put on. I will tell you, out of most of the events that are put on, the fundraiser probably had the fewest people there. So I'm very concerned about what they can really generate as far as funds. There's no way they would come up with a $4.5 million gap. It's just not possible in our community. And I'm pretty sure they would feel that same way after having done their fundraiser. It was a great fundraiser. It was great performances. It was a nice evening. I went home with a beautiful painting painted by Mr. Worthen. It's in my house. I love it, but I'm just very skeptical that we could then raise that money. So in reality, that I feel we have to really think that gap would be from our budget, because we're not going to. And in addition, what Pamela and David may not know, maybe even Kelvin, I don't know. At one point for the Performing Arts Building, we did hire a professional fundraiser. And do you remember the dollar amount we got?
Did you get
Yeah.
$5?
Yeah, it was zero. So for me, I'm very concerned about fundraising for a deficit. Maybe if we were in Park City, it would work. I don't think in West Jordan, it's gonna be, we might raise $100, but I'm skeptical there. So that's a concern for me. I would like to throw a question and maybe another alternative, and I understand we'd like a community building. I would like a community building for our community. I didn't particularly, as a mom, like to go to Kearns High for dance recitals at night, but that's what we did because that's what was available. Because we say, well, our schools are usually busy, so that's not a viable alternative usually. But I've heard rumors that ZAP tax is coming up soon, and I've heard rumors that if we apply for a rec center, we just might be the lucky recipients this time. The mayor told me we are preparing for that. What if we looked at that and combined a community and a stage area for that? I cannot in good conscience support something going into it with a $4.5 million deficit. My support can only come for a building that I know we have the funding for. So that's where I'm at. I can't do it.
Councilmember Green.
As you look at the one on the screen, it might be a square box, but it offers the most flexibility in the city. I mean, if you look at that, if you build a stage on it, because I don't think we have to build necessarily a black box like the Mid-Valley Arts Center. What I do think we need to do is make sure that we're using a flat floor so that we can push the appropriate riser chairs in and out and have space. But if you look at this design, you could also do and put a stage on the bottom end, and there's enough space that you could, if you opened up the doors to the back of the stage, you could have a plaza out there that we landscape and you make it an amphitheater. There's a lot of flexibility here. And as you added, there's a lot of flexibility to go to is that the east? I guess that's the east, to add on another functional arts center. What I have a problem with, and this is, there's two things. I've never been against building the arts center. I am against, and I'm a totally 100% behind Councilmember Whitelock, trying to break ground and then try to figure out how we're going to come up with another 4.5, 5 million plus dollars is irresponsible. Creating a one-use facility in this city is not that good. I mean, we can put a nice stage in this, which is different than Viridian. Viridian doesn't have a stage. Viridian doesn't have as good a sound system. But if we can build a box, a tilled-up building, as you mentioned, and we can put a good stage in it, and we can put good lighting and good sound and some good. I've talked to a couple of people on the in the Cultural Society of West Jordan, and they just want a good place to perform. They're not interested in whether the outside brick is, high quality brick, or if it's a cinder block wall or whatever. They want a good place to perform that's better than the corner of Center Street and Main Street in Midvale. If they want a great place to perform, then there's a place in Taylorsville that the county will be glad to rent to them. I believe, now I could be wrong, and I've had some very quick conversations with a couple of county council members, but I believe that the county council is going to support, they're not going to jeopardize our TRCC funding if we go back and we show that we're trying to be responsible with the taxpayers' money. If we decide that what we want to do is add on to the Senior Citizen Center, the county will work with us because that's the responsible thing to do in a tight budget era, and I don't think they'd not work with us. This design is very good in the fact that it is flexible. We can add on to it, and it gives the community a great space to be able to do things. And I think, Corbin, you're right. It gives the arts people, they may be able to do some rehearsals in there, and we're not as worried about trying to rent this out every night. If we're trying to rent this out, I'm just going to tell you, I do not believe, and I noticed something in the news the other day. When the Delta Center announced that they were going back, when the Utah Jazz announced that they're going to get Delta Center to be the Delta, and it's never not been the Delta Center to me. So, the Delta Center is the Delta Center, but they talk about the Delta Center having 300 and something plus nights a year in the Delta Center. This ain't going to do it. It doesn't matter what art center, what kind of building we build. We're delusional if we think we're going to get more than 40 or, I'd be surprised if we got more than 40 or 50 nights a year use out of it. And if we got more than 100, I'd be super impressed. We're not going to have standing room only with people waiting in lines to come to this, to come to our arts building to rent out. I would much rather have a multi-use community center where the whole community can benefit. If we focus only on the arts, and I know we made a promise to the arts that we would build a place where they could perform. We did not promise them, and I don't think we promised them an art center. So I want a building that is taxpayer reasonable, that's taxpayer responsible, that can allow for future expansion, that can go to the east, that can go to the, let's see, that's north-south, it can go to the south, and do those kind of things to make, so that we have a place where we have a community gathering spot. The Cultural Center over in West Valley is a good example of something like that. We need a place where we can gather, not just a place where we hold 4 plays a year for 4 nights a year in there and a couple of concerts. And so I'll stop with that right now.
We'll go Councilmember Jacob, then Councilmember Worthen online, and then Councilmember Pack.
Thank you. Gosh, I was all set to say, go ahead and build something because we've been talking about it forever and we're going to keep talking about it forever until something gets built. the conversation is not gonna end if we say, don't do it. If we say, don't do it now, we'll have a conversation in a year. Can we do it now? And if we say, don't do it then, it'll be a year after that. Can we do it now? When are we gonna do it? When are we gonna do it? And it's just gonna keep coming up, coming up, coming up like a bad penny, and it's not gonna ever go away until it's done. So I think not doing it is not a feasible option. Whereas I have my personal feelings about whether every single city needs its own theater is kind of beside the point, because it's not just me. That said, the remodeling or the expansion of the senior center is an interesting thought that I hadn't ever heard of until tonight. And that's, I mean, because I didn't look at this earlier, but that's outside the box. That's using your head, and that seems to make sense to me. I wonder if, and I was going to interrupt and ask you this, Corbin, in your presentation, but I wonder if the reduced ability to rent out the space is offset by the reduced need to increase revenue, because we're already paying for it. We're already paying for that building. We're already paying for O&M and everything else. Does that make sense? Is that, I would think that would kind of offset.
All the earned revenue on any option is to offset the O&M costs.
Right.
Yeah. So the senior center is probably, now, I don't think any of the options will pay for themselves.
Right.
To be clear, okay? Now the senior center, of the three, I think the senior center is the least earned revenue, but it's also the least operating
The
cost.
least
But I
increased
don't think earned revenue on the senior center expansion will cover the marginal added costs.
Right, but it
to be
will
clear.
cover it, I think, to the same extent that a new building would also not be covered by it.
Right, you know, if you say, hey, on any of them, maybe we could get 50% earned revenue to cost,
Right.
that's proportionate for senior, simplified, or full building.
Yeah. Yeah, I've never expected the building to pay for itself. It's not going to be a good investment for the city in terms of dollars. It's just not. But neither is a park. And we don't have a city without parks, so we wouldn't stand for a city without parks. So having something, I think, is, I like the idea of the senior center idea because it's outside the box. Short of that, I don't care what we build. I hated the discussion when we were deciding, do we put 200 seats or 250 seats or 275 seats? Slanted floor, fixed seats, flat floor. I hated that discussion. Get an architect, design something cool, build it. I don't care. I don't care if it's an empty box. I don't care if we need more money. I would, if we need more money, let's just face the fact that it's coming out of reserves. We're paying for it, and that's the more money. It's not a not knowing where it's coming from. We know where it's coming from. It's coming from reserves. That's where it's coming from. And it may be $4.5 million as of last July, which probably means it's $5.5 million now, and probably $6.5 million by the time we get to next July. Let's just be real. Cities have a really bad habit of underestimating and over costing. Does that make sense? We should estimate high and then come in below budget instead of trying to estimate low to sell the project to a council and then come in over budget. See next door for Exhibit A, for example. By the way, when we were considering this in 2020 and 2018 and 2016, we weren't considering spending $5 million on a remodel next door. Just a thought. Anyway, I don't care what we build, but I kind of like the senior center idea. I think it's creative and I think it has the most potential for the least amount of risk. That's just what I think.
Councilmember Worthman.
Sorry, takes me a minute to get off mute. Well, you know, I don't have an opinion on this. Insert laughter now. Yeah, you know, first of all, Mayor, I never promised the community an arts building. I have always promised the citizens that I would look at spending their money responsibly. It's not my money. Well, it is my money. I live here, but it's their money. And I have said all along, I don't want to build anything we can't afford. If you can't make your house payment, you don't go buy a new truck. If you're making a house payment and you have enough money in the bank to buy a new truck, fine. So an option that we can afford, I'm fine with. I also do like the idea of putting it with the senior center, because if you go around the county and you see some of the other areas that have multifunction buildings, they're just better community centers. I think it'd be great for our seniors to be able to have this as part of that center, give them more options to use some things. So my vote's going to go with the fact that it's affordable and it brings it into a multifunction building to look at using the senior building. Short and sweet.
Awesome. Thank you, Councilmember Pack.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate the conversation, and it's wonderful how we look at things from different angles. So I want to respect everybody's viewpoint and also offer a few ideas and also some background just in my experience. It's not to talk about me so much as just to say, to explain how I'm looking at it. I served on the Olaf board with Mayor Newton, the interesting name, you know, when Frozen was coming out to the old library arts facility. And I was also at the groundbreaking here, just, you know, walking distance. And it seems that with each iteration that we talk about, the funding gap gets bigger. You know, at first it was, hey, well, let's save $60,000, $70,000, $80,000. We'll cover it up and wait until the spring. And, you know, now we see how that gap's gotten wider, and it's never going to get lower. I've served for over a decade on a few theater boards, Hale Center Theater in Sandy, Empress Theater in Magna, and Babcock Performing Readers up at University of Utah. So you look at the wide array of demographics in the Salt Lake Valley that supports. I have a postdoctoral theater arts certificate from New York University where we studied all of this. How do you support a theater? How do you make it viable, whether it's a community theater, whether it's a government subsidized theater, whether it's a private theater? I'd like to have something that we're proud of, something that's not, as has been mentioned, hokey, so to speak. To save money, I can see the logic there in having the box maybe pop up. You know, there's sprung structures could be another thing that we look at, like have been put over some structures at Kearns Oaker Park Fitness Center. And I've networked in different organizations to try to get costs down that way. It'd be nice to have something that is adequate. I guess adequate's a relative subjective term. We certainly don't need the Taj Mahal, but something that we're proud of. And I do agree that there are intangibles that come to a community that could be more important than having a revenue neutral or revenue positive arts facility. It can also bring in a lot of revenue with people coming to do other activities, to go out to eat, do some shopping. And it seems that viable communities, if you look at whenever they've been started, even from our pioneer ancestry, the first things that were built were churches and schools and arts facilities. And with separation of church and state, obviously we're not talking about church or even education here, but with the arts, that's the thing we're in charge of. And I have had some good lobbying communications with the county council, and I do believe that once we get serious about it and commit to it, that more funding would come. Is that a promise? No, but it's a high likelihood. So I would just submit an alternative point of view that it would be fiscally irresponsible of us to not move forward because the gap keeps getting wider. We're never going to have enough money to build it. We do beat our sales tax revenue expectations month after month, quarter after quarter on a general basis. It's that old adage, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, right? The next best time is now. And I wanted to ensure for my own self that it's not just a pet project because I love the arts. So what I've done is I've sent feelers out to try to get emails back. And as you know from previous conversations, I like to go in the manner that the preponderance of citizens respond to me. And have I had a few negative comments? The only negative that I've received is, well, there's a funding gap. The positives that I've received have a lot of these other intangibles, and also that proponents of the arts would really like to not have to go outside of a city of almost 119,000 people and support other cities with our activities. I have visited the senior center in person, and I've checked that out. I've talked with some professionals, and to me, I'd be more of a proponent of having something by the senior center, not in conjunction with the senior center for a variety of reasons. I mean, we could talk about them later. I understand the idea of having a quasi-functional facility where you could have bleachers that roll out, roll back. I've visited the Mid-Valley Arts Center. You know, they have some black box areas like that where we did have our ZapTax function, right? Mayor, I do serve on ZapTax with Mayor Burton. But still, I believe that if we were going to expand, instead of doing the box and then the theater, let's do the theater and then the box. It's a tough one because I too want to be fiscally responsible, but I don't know if any of us in this room have saved up enough money to buy our homes outright and then we buy it. Well, no, we've got a definite funding gap and we put a down payment down. Now, I'm not advocating that we need to finance all of it or have a bond, but I do believe that if we start over, you know, we've lost that $500,000 that we've already invested in schematic drawings. And I wish it were a little more visible where we had the groundbreaking, you know, and that we had to cover it back up and the easement issue. But I would just say that it's not going to get any more affordable. And so if the argument is we want to be fiscally responsible, I would just submit that because the funding gap's going to get wider and wider, it would be irresponsible to not do it 5 years ago, 4, 3, 2, 1, or today. So I'd be a proponent of the first option, all things considered. So we have a landmark destination we're proud of, people want to come to. It still is multi-purpose that can serve the needs of the band, the orchestra, theater arts. We could have some meeting space there, which, as we've said, we don't currently have a place where we can hold meetings. We've got the County Veridian Center. So thank you for sharing your viewpoints. In hearing everybody's viewpoint, I think that it more adamantly makes me feel that, again, it's if we don't do it now, when are we going to do it? If we say, well, when we have the money, when it's more affordable. It's never going to be more affordable than now. Thank you.
Okay, my turn. Similar to Councilmember Jacob, I'd like to see us do something. Similar to Councilmember Pack, I'd like to see us do something now. Similar to Councilmember Whitelock, I'd like to see us not have a huge gap in funding. I'd like to see us build something designed for the arts specifically for that. I really like that design that we have. We have price tag issues though. So, I like the creativity behind the suggestion with putting it with the senior center. That's it, having been over there and trying to do a remodel, I think is going to be tricky and rather limiting. And we take our kids over there to swimming lessons during the evenings. That place, that parking lot right over there can get pretty packed. I think layering everything right up in that corner, parking wasn't one of the downsides that was discussed. I think that would probably be an issue as well, on top of the multiple entities there. I've never really been a fan of the location over by the rodeo because having a really nice arts center right there doesn't really flow with everything else that was out there. I've loudly advocated for an updated master plan for that rodeo arena area. I don't see how the design that was proposed would really fit well into that. That said, the thing that I really like, I'm starting to like the idea of, is that sort of tilt-up structure back there and allowing that to be used by the arts. I hate to say as an interim, but I would really like to see them have a building designed specifically for their uses. But I don't know that we can jump into it all at once. Councilmember Pack was talking about the idea of, well, who saves up and gets their home right at the start or pays cash for it. Similarly, it's kind of a given that there's going to be some sort of evolution, some sort of step up. When we had a chance to go out and look at the Spanish Fork Rodeo, they had some nice buildings that were just pretty simple, pretty basic, and they were multi-use. We were looking at that thinking, wow, this would be something that could be used by the arts group. This is something that could be used by the rodeo when we have dinners, when we have things like that. There's a lot of different uses out of something that we could do. And I think that's kind of where my mind's going. Something multi-purpose that could be out in the spot that was designated that would work well years down the road, primarily to support functions that are happening in the rodeo. But for the time being, it can be used by the arts until we have time to have a proper arts facility like the one that's been dreamed of and designed and we spent $500,000 on. We have a dearth of amenities on the west side of the city. I would love to see us have a permanent home for the arts, perhaps somewhere a little bit further out west. We talked about the rec center out there. I think that should still be the dream. I like the idea of trying to go there, but I really want to do something now, and I don't know that we can get our dream right now in a financially responsible manner. So of the options that were presented, I personally like the box idea next to the kind of next to the pool, kind of by the rodeo arena. I'd love to see us go somewhere that direction.
And really,
Councilmember Blum.
really quick, I was listening to everybody, and I want to be quick because I grew up in the arts and it's the reason why I do what I do today. But I was trying to figure out how to word everything via what I agreed with every person on here. And then when Chris spoke up, I was like, that's it. I wholeheartedly agree with Chair about the thoughts and doing it now and the dreams and everything and being fiscally responsible. And I would have to concur with the Chair on this in every way. So thank you for saying that.
And just to clarify, my thought is if we were to go with that building out there, that wouldn't be the end of the road. It's not, okay, those decades of arts facility conversations, they come to an end. There's still, what can we do down the road further? What do we really want? Councilmember Whitelock, Green, Pack, Jacob, any other thoughts? I'd like to try and get consensus to Mr. Lee. Anything else? Having heard everybody, I'd like to give everyone a second chance to chime in. Just really short, 30-second synopsis as opinions I'm sure have changed and perceptions have modified. Councilmember Whitelock?
I too want to give the community somewhere where they can perform. I think it's a good thing in the community to have arts. I think that for hundreds of years, societies have prioritized arts, and it's a good thing. And I would like to do that. I just need it to be something that we can afford. And the dream isn't what we can afford. When I got married, I would have preferred an old Victorian on the avenues.
You couldn't afford that?
I could not.
Can't afford it now either.
Now I can afford it even less. Talk about funding gaps. However, my investment, I would have had more. So I actually, I'm fine with the senior idea. I think it's a brilliant idea.
I wonder who came up with that.
But I'm also fine with the box because I think it could serve well. I tend to, when we're at the rodeo, cringe a little bit when we have these people that are supporting our rodeo at such high dollar amounts and we're saying, here, come on into our tent that's 90 degrees and enjoy this hot meal.
It is a carpeted tent though. In places.
Yeah, and in places it's not so hot when the air conditioner's working. So I think it would be good for that. So I could support a tilt-up building if we could make it in our budget. And I don't feel that the county I feel the county are just like this body. We're just all humans who want to serve our communities. So I don't think the county's going to have a huge issue if we say we want to be fiscally responsible and we're thinking we could do this instead. I would want a couple of things in that cement box. I would want seating that could be rolled out, that could be bleacher style, and something that looked like a stage, because I don't want just a flat floor with chairs and enjoy. So I do want a little more than that. So that's where I'm at. I can support that. I can't support something we go in a deficit too much for. I could support the senior center.
Thank you. And we'll just run down. Councilmember Green.
If you were gonna do my priorities, it's the box, the senior citizen center, and then the other one. And the other one's not much of an option because I'd vote against it because I don't want to go that much in debt and use and obligate 25% or more of our reserve funds in the city for an art center. I think the box allows us a lot of flexibility with design. Like I said, you put a couple of big garage, you put the right size garage door on the back of a stage, and you make a loading dock on the back of the stage that a truck can pull up to load to the stage. And a year later, you open that up, you put some concrete out, you put chairs, and you got an amphitheater. So I think it gives us a lot of flexibility for future growth. I like as Councilmember Lightlock, I've seen some of those telescopic bleachers for Art Center. They are beautiful. They're leather covered seats. They've got carpeted floors. Well, but they're beautiful. They're beautiful. They're beautiful. They're beautiful seats. It's not something that we're going to be ashamed of. People will be proud there. Depending on what we get with the shape, we may even get more seats, and we won't need to argue about the 250, 275, 200. I just had to throw that in, Zach. Sorry. And so, but it allows, like what Kayleen said as well, is that, it's right there close to the rodeo. You push the bleachers back, or the telescopic chairs back, and now you've got a great place to hold a dinner, and you got a stage at the end that if somebody wanted to rent it out, they could have a dinner and a performer at the end. So I think it allows for a lot of great flexibility for the community, and it's responsible, and that's where I would go.
Thank you. Councilmember Melissa.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I'll go with that. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, you're great.
Okay. All right. My husband, as you know, listens to this, and he came down to say, "You sound choppy." Was that just to you or to the regular public? So
Just
anyway.
to us.
Well, then to my husband, he kind of half hears me. So anyway, look, I'm all about fiscal responsibility, and you guys know that. It's about not going over budget, not spending too much money. I do prefer the senior center simply because I like the idea of a multi-purpose building. But if the majority wants to go with more of a pop-up and that fits within budget, I'm not going to argue with that. So as long as we can keep it within budget, and I really don't want to go, oh, just kidding, it's going to cost an extra $2 million, and we need to get it from somewhere. I prefer something that is going to be multi-use, not just for the arts people. And as long as we can go down those lines, I'm good with it.
Awesome. Thank you. Councilmember Bloom.
As someone who's performed in box theaters where we've had to take things in and out, and it's been some of my most memorable and best performances in theater, by the way. We've sold out shows and been able to add on as well, like you said, we weren't limited to the thing. So my number one is definitely the fiscal responsibility, keep it under budget of the box, and things like winter wow, it must be getting late for me. The wintertime farmers markets and things like that. There's so much potential in my mind for the community, in addition to being able to have some really amazing performances in there. So, yeah, a lot of potential for me I can see in that option. Absolutely.
Councilmember Pack.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so we need to make sure that we don't jeopardize the county funding. Isn't that a consideration if we go with option 2 or 3? So, before we get gung-ho on these other options, we might want to, that's going to widen the gap. If we need to get a commitment from the county that they would still perform on their offer.
Correct. If we change the design, we need to go back to the county and make sure we can receive some grant for it. Yes.
And this means we forfeit $500,000 sunk costs into architectural renderings.
Correct. Now, that's a sunk cost either way. But if you choose the full building, it's you don't have to incur new design costs. The square box, the simplified version, would be relatively low design costs because the building is very simple, but there still would be design costs to it. The expansion of the senior center would be high relative design costs because it is remodel and it is a challenging remodel.
Yeah,
for
a
the
square
first,
box, a square box is only gonna cost $120, $150 a square foot.
So the first option though, we wouldn't have to retool that. We wouldn't be forfeiting $500,000.
Correct.
Okay.
It's 12.5 million from here. The 500,000 is already a sunk cost, but it is already designed. Yeah.
Right. So, when we're talking about being fiscally responsible, let's keep that in mind, that we're throwing away $500,000 if we go with a different option.
Microphone.
And we can do it in the future, but
We
basically.
do own those plans.
So we're not throwing that away because we own the plans and we could use them in the future, correct?
Well, I guess it's the way that you want to posture that, but it's easy to say we're going to expand in the future and feel fuzzy about it, but when, how much? I mean, realistically, would we build that other side-by-side, drawing that was on there? We're going to have the box, but then, when would we actually get that theater? So I would also want to go back to my constituents and just ascertain how many of them would feel that something really is better than nothing. Some of them probably feel that way, but also, how is this really what they want versus what we as a council want? So just some questions there on, you can look at it either way, and I want to respect other people's viewpoints. But when we talk about fiscally responsible, that's arguable. And is something better than nothing? Might be. Maybe not. Thank you.
Councilmember Jacob.
Thank you. You guys all bring up some interesting points. I don't think something is better than nothing. Because I think if we build inadequate something or subpar something, the clamor will still be there to build better and more down the future. That's why I don't like the box idea so much. I think we can build something that is more permanent, nice looking at the senior center than we could in the empty box idea. And obviously the full building that we're already somewhat down the road on is the nicest option. It'd be the most, for me, it would be the one that I would have the most pride in. Now, that said, I still think it's inadequate. I still think a 200-seat theater is like, really? That's like small. So I still think that's inadequate. But I think, I don't know, when the mayor brought this up when we were at lunch today, he said, I need authorization to start building the theater. I'm like, again? How many times have we authorized building this theater? We voted on this like 15 times, and every time it's, yes, go, build. And here we are again. So I'm saying, yes, go build. You guys decide what you want to build. I don't care. It's not my art center. I mean, it's my art center and that it's my city. I'm not an arts guy. I'll go to plays. I won't be in plays, and you'll prefer the plays that I'm not in over the ones that I am in. The only thing I act is I act like a city councilman. And even that's a subpar performance sometimes.
I think quickly I want to address the thought on the sunk cost for what's already been done. At least my perspective on this, I had a college professor talk about what he had done with one of his business classes where he auctioned off a $20 bill. And really quick, people would start bidding on that $20 bill, $2, $3, $4, got up to 18, 19, and then 20. As soon as you've got the $20 bill that's been auctioned off for 20, oh, sorry, let me back up. This is a little bit of a different auction because not only did the highest bidder win, but whoever came in number 2 also had to pay, but they didn't walk away with anything. So as soon as you get up to the value of that $20 bill, the person who had bid 19, they still had to pay $19, but they were walking away with nothing because the other person who bid 20, they were going to win it. So they bid 21 because they didn't want to lose the money that they'd already put in. Record was over $200 that was bid to avoid losing out on that $20. So it was easy. The moral of the story is it can be easy to lose sight of where things are when you're focused on what those sunk costs are and what's been spent and gone. And then sometimes it's better to say, you know what, that's already been spent. A lesson's been learned. I'll take my $19 lesson and just leave it at that, rather than continuing to chase it. So in this example, I really like what we got with the designs for that plan for that $500,000. I would love to see us do that someday, but I'm not at a point where I'm ready to commit $12 million to save that 500 that's already been spent. If in the end we can get something that's workable now for the budget we had, the 8 million, 8.5, somewhere in there, I'll take that as a lesson learned and why we should not have decades-long conversations about city facilities. That's just my perspective. So you bring up a very valid point. That's just my perception on it. It is a sunk cost. We might be able to use that later. We may not, but I'm okay with where we're at. So my hope is to continue with the box that's multi-use, has a lot of different applications. Councilmember Whitelock?
I just really want to know, how high did you bid?
He was relaying the story, so we didn't actually get to bid on this one. So with that, I think it was pretty visible that the council has a lot of desire to move forward. I don't know that anyone necessarily wants to wait and program this formally into the next year's budget. If there's things that we can do now, council, would you be open to prioritizing this discussion for a future work session, as long as it's not about the number of seats?
I don't ever want to say the word theater again, so.
All right. Corbin, is there?
Can I?
Please.
So I've been trying to quickly jot down where you're at, but rather than me speculate, can I ask you to go through a little exercise with me? Kelvin listed off his priorities. Of the 4 options, this is 1, this is 2, this is 3, this is 4. If I may, if you'll indulge me, I'd like to ask each of you, tell me your 4 options. Now stay within the options, if you would, just for purposes of exercise. Senior center is my number 1, or box is my number 1, or full building is my number 1. Start over is my number 1. If you would say those, I'm going to jot them down, and then I'm going to repeat back to you the average and and this building, the option that has the lowest number is the highest ranking,
You had 5 that
Collectively.
would support a tilt-up
right?
stair box.
I mean, I can ask you, but this is the way I can get your
Okay.
ranks from all of you and just confirm back to you, this is what you're ranking. Is that okay, Chair?
It is if it goes quick, because there's a motion that's going to be coming for a bathroom break momentarily. So let's.
Very quick. Let me call it out fast. Okay. Chair McConaughey, will you give me your preference of the 4 options?
Box is number 1, senior center number 2, and the other 2 don't rank for me.
Pick between them.
I couldn't be supportive of either with a significant deficit or starting from scratch. I'll say the full building number 3, starting over number 4, but yeah.
Fair.
In the interest of,
Councilman Green said basically the same thing on the bottom 2, but if you would, Councilman Green, give me your 4 options.
Box, senior citizen, and then I'm with him, however he voted on the bottom 2. I don't want to start over, but I don't want a deficit, so those are off the table for me.
Councilwoman Whitelock.
I don't want to play. For me, it really comes down to, is the box or the senior center going to be the least impact to our budget? So, and I don't have that answer, and neither do you. But because the majority of the council is supportive of the box, I can go box, then I'll go senior center, then I'll go creative solution, maybe combining it with a rec center on the west side, and then the existing plans, because the existing plans we can't afford.
Okay. Yes, go ahead.
although Councilmember Worthman's seat may not be
Yes.
physically occupied.
Yep, I was just going to call on her, yeah.
Perfect.
Councilwoman Worthen. Thank you, Chair.
I prefer the idea of the senior center first and then the box, but again, I can change them interchangeably based on the majority. But I would go senior box, and then, yeah, same with the chair. I mean, I don't want either one of those. So I would just put me down the way Chris did it. I'll copy Chris.
Councilwoman Bloom.
I need to go to bed. Box senior center, existing and start over.
Councilman Pack.
Thank you. Option one, the nice theater. Option number two, the box. Number three, the senior center. Although with more discussion, those two could flip because this was just kind of a broad overview. I think it'd be worth having a more in-depth discussion if we end up having to choose between two or three. And then option number four, just starting over.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilman Jacob.
Thank you. Senior center, existing plan, box, something else. When he said say four, I was like, what's the fourth? Does that give you?
That was perfect. Yep. Do you want me to calculate for you in 2 seconds, or do you want to take a break and we'll come back and resume this
You have
conversation?
2 seconds. Do you want to make the motion while he's tabulating?
I move that we take a 7-minute recess.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We will recess until 7:38. All right, it is 7:38. It has been our 7 minutes, so I'd like to call us back to order. We left off with Mr. Lee calculating the results of comments from the council, and would love to hear where that ended.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. 4 of you chose the simplified box as the number 1 alternative. 2 of you had that as your second option, and 1 is the third option. That was the highest ranking. That was the highest ranking alternative with an average of 1.6. The senior center, 4 of you chose the senior center as second, 2 as your first, and 1 is the third. So that had an average of 1.8, and then the full building and starting over were significantly lower. So the simplified box was for 6 out of 7 of you, the simplified box was either number 1 or number 2, and for 4 of you, it was the number 1 choice.
Okay. Did you get what you needed from the council?
Well, so there's some follow-up questions now. We do not have when the costs went up, we pulled out of the current budget the actual funding for the project, and we set it aside. The mayor's made it clear, I want to get going on this. I want to do something. You've made it clear, do something now. Don't wait. What I'm taking from this is pretty clear direction on go forward and study and design the simplified box. We will probably need to come back to you with a budget amendment at some point in the future if we're going to start on that this current fiscal year. I want to make sure that's all your understanding too, and we have your general blessing to get going on it in the current fiscal year.
Council members Pax quite like him on. Let's go over there before.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just wanting to ensure again that we get that commitment from the county that this will still be okay, because that's up in the air.
That's
on
probably the first
funding.
conversation we need to have, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, good point, Councilman, thank you.
And also too, it might be good to engage the community as well. For instance, Vic and Michelle Groves and West Jordan Arts. It would just be nice to see, okay, if we're putting up a box, what is proposed that's going to go in the box? You know, all we have is shaded bathroom, lobby, but just to make sure that it's adequate. Again, wanting to ensure that, you know, sometimes something isn't better than nothing. Just to find that happy medium, that it's adequate for the needs, so we don't just have the warm fuzzies that we're doing something.
Yeah, we probably need to involve them heavily in giving feedback to make sure we'll actually function, even though the building is very simple, very designed. Can I share with you?
Real
Sorry,
quick,
go ahead, Chair.
to kind of highlight what Councilmember Pack has shared. There are a number of folks that are watching tonight that are on Zoom. Including the Groves, as you mentioned. Kilpax are on there, former council members. Councilmember Lamb as well. So they are listening, they are aware, and based on your comments, I'm sure we will hear from them shortly. So for those listening, please chime in. This meeting doesn't have a public comment period, but you know how to reach us.
Okay. Anyways, I feel like I have direction from the majority of the council. I know I have direction from the mayor to get going immediately, and I feel like I have that from you as well. So with your blessings, we'll proceed. We'll start design, and we'll need to come back to you for some budget amendments to put some money behind these efforts.
I have one ongoing request. Don't come back and ask me what I think and what we should do again. I'm done. I'm done.
On all things or just this topic? Huh?
Yeah, no, on this one.
All right. Well, that went slightly over the 10 minutes of deliberation that was anticipated, but I'm glad we resolved it there. We'll move on to our next item tonight, which is budget priorities. So, let me see here. Corbin, is that one you as well?
Yes, yeah. I'm going to ask Denise to join me up here, and also rely heavily on Becky and Jamie, who will chime in from time to time, possibly also. Becky, will you come? January is the start of the budget season for us. We, as you know, we work heavily on preparing the mayor's proposed budget from January through the end of April and give the council the budget in May, first meeting in May. It is a intense process. It's my favorite time of year. I love the budget process. I like the budget committee. I like working on the city's budget every year because it's really where the rubber meets the road in terms of serving the public and in terms of how it's about where the priorities lie by what you fund. With that said, we wanted to take time in the work session tonight to get feedback from you as to your council priorities. We'd like to, before we start working on the mayor's proposed budget, we really want to know what are the council's priorities so we can try to build those into the budget. I would much rather have your input, have your priorities at the start, and work them into the budget from the beginning than to deliver a mayor's proposed budget and find out that we did miss the mark in terms of the things that were important to the council. In the current budget, as in the past few budgets, you set out your priorities in the budget from the beginning of the budget book. Will you go to the next slide? In the current budget, you list 6 primary pillars, we'll call them, and then sub-goals under these 6 pillars. The 6 pillars, or the 6 main general priorities of the city's budget from the city council, are demonstrating financial sustainability, enhance the city aesthetics, enhance community safety, support employee retention and recruitment, sustain infrastructure replacement and maintenance, and promote process improvement. As I mentioned, those are the priorities in the current budget. And later in this presentation, we'll talk briefly about how we're working to meet those priorities currently and how we budgeted for those priorities. My question to you now is, do those categories still represent your top general priorities? Will you go to the next slide? Are these the 6 pillars you want to have maintain as the as kind of the bedrock goals for the budget, or do you want to change any of these? I'll pause here and let you discuss.
Councilmember Bloom.
I feel that the current should be the same because I like the continuity. I think it helps the staff and I think it helps us continue with our vision of the city. So that's my feedback.
Councilmember Green, so are you going for the mic?
I just pull it closer. But since you called on me, I think I want, you know what, for budget priorities, I want to keep these same 6. There may be a couple of policy priorities that maybe we want to do differently, but budget priorities, yeah, keep these the same.
So I'm not necessarily, if these are supposed to be the order, I'm not necessarily thrilled with where city aesthetics falls compared to some of the others, but I'm okay with these for the most part. One thing that I would potentially change, I don't know if process improvement needs to be called out as a budget priority, but citizen engagement has been something that we've been very vocal about. We've been anxious to try new efforts to see what we can do there, and we've had a lot of success with that, but citizen engagement's not called out here. If we were to add that in here, I'd kind of like to see it.
I'd support that.
I'd also support that.
Do we want to swap, without really deprioritizing process improvement, do we want to swap process improvement and replace it with citizen engagement?
Can we throw up an idea of how spending money increases citizen engagement?
Sure, go for it.
No, I'm asking. I don't know. That's why you that are proposing putting citizen engagement as a budget priority, how's that work?
Advertising.
Do we offer $5
Advertising
to come to a
dollars.
city council meeting? I mean, I don't know. That's what I'm asking.
We've done that with engagement through social media. We've seen how folks are more likely to come out to events. We've heard, I'm sure, well, if we were to ask Tani, I'm sure she could instantly give us a 3-hour overview of just the highlights of what have been done. But there's a lot of good that's been done there, and it has been a priority for us in past years. We have added funding to it. I'm not necessarily saying we need to add it. I'm just suggesting we call it out as we do want to make sure that we're engaged with our citizens, whether that's providing transparency into what's happening with our meetings through technology enhancements to make it available to participate electronically, or events that are closer to home on both the east side and the west side of the city, or better advertising of some of the different services that we have, like the e-recycling or the tall and small ball, things like that.
So if we called it citizen communications, like us communicating outward to citizens, which is what I heard most of what you mentioned.
Well,
I think it's more than that though, because I
I-
think it's the events.
that's what I was gonna say, is like, it's like events. So, for example, we have I'm gonna just throw this out so that you can keep track of maybe this is a budget priority this year, or if we make it a budget priority, community engagement means citizens be engaged. We have a population, if I remember right, from Tawny's great demographic presentation with the legislature last week, that we have someplace around 30-something% Hispanic population in the city. Am I close, Tawny? Yeah. Well, why don't we have a Cinco de Mayo festival? Why don't we have some events that are focused on minorities? We've got the Islamic Center over on 90th. Why don't we? When I say community engagement, I'm not just talking about advertising to the city. I'm talking about getting citizens involved, and are there things that we can do with Western Stampede to get more people coming? So I'd say community engagement does include our typical advertisement, if you will, but it also includes getting people involved in committees, getting people involved in activities that are appropriate, closer east-west side, all of those kind of things. That's where I'd be with that.
The youth council, the adopt a storm drain.
Yes. Yep, youth council, adopt a storm drain, what else do we, yeah, you're right, there's lots of things.
Everything from expanding entertainment at Western Stampede, all of that.
Council, these are, as budget priorities, are you willing to shift dollars more to those engagement items, whether it be communication, outreach, events, those kinds of things that are being discussed?
We have in the past.
So this kind of priority would also include increased staffing in the community engagement department.
Potentially.
Yeah.
Are there four, I'm going to move it along a little bit, are there four that want to add citizen engagement to the general priorities?
Councilmember Pack has
thank
his
you.
light on.
I would.
I love hearing that voice from above. Melissa said yes, so we'll count that. Councilmember Pack.
Thank you, Chair. I like what's been voiced, that for continuity and so that people don't jump from one thing to another, I don't think there's anything wrong with the current priorities. I don't necessarily think they're in hierarchical order either. As you mentioned, it's just all in a round ball of important ideas, while also noting that we have had a lot of citizen engagement in defining what the priorities should be. And so it might be somewhat dated, but at the same time, we've had various open houses. You might think back to what was considered the prime directive of West Jordan City and from the community strategic plan. And that quote is to provide citizens the opportunity to live and enjoy an exceptional quality of life. And so the 6 citizen directives were to leave the city better than found it, have a sense of community, family feels safe, looks and feels like home, develop and maintain infrastructure, and vibrant economic development and jobs. So a lot of that's contained in here, but not necessarily all of those ideas, while they could be subcomponents of that. The general plan vision statement is vibrant economic development, efficient transportation, sustainable infrastructure, and transparent, responsive communication from the city. So those 6 aren't comprehensive of everything here, but I think if we keep in mind what citizens have mentioned are their priorities, not just what we would like to see, that we could incorporate into these main areas everything that they've mentioned. I just don't want to lose sight of what the citizenry has said are their priorities that they want us to focus on. Thank you.
Agreed, good point. As you were saying, that process improvement also to me seems like a sub bullet or a sub point of financial sustainability. So, yeah, my thought would be remove process improvement from this list and add community engagement there. Any, Councilmember Whitlock?
A couple of things. I think Chris is right. Could we put these in alphabetical order instead? Because otherwise, at first I thought they were, and then I got down there and thought, oh, why? And then he brought that up. So I think it would be better to have them in alphabetical order. I'm happy to add community engagement. I think it is something that this council has talked about. I agree with Pamela that if you change every year, you get nowhere usually. So I think keeping them, but I think adding community engagement would be my choice, not because I still want us to look for process improvements, because to me that's investing in websites, in not websites, but in computer software and different technologies that can save us time, although sometimes I think they take more time. Overall, they're supposed to save us time though. So things that, like the brine truck. I mean, that has been an awesome thing for our city. So I think that is a process improvement. So for me, I'd like to keep them and just add that. And I do feel, like Councilmember Pack brought up, I do feel that these incorporate the things that we hear from our residents. So, thank you.
So, any heartburn if we remain with the 6 and then add community engagement as a 7th?
I like that. I want to keep it and add.
Councilmember Pack.
Thank you. A question on that. As I read through the citizen directives and the general plan vision statement again, I do believe, again, all of them are somewhat covered except for, do we want to elevate to a bullet point transportation and economic development? I don't see, we've got employee retention and recruitment. We've got infrastructure, so that could be roads. But those two could be their own category, or at least make sure that we don't lose sight of economic development and transportation. Those are pretty huge.
Could we maybe put transportation under infrastructure and maybe economic development under
Sure.
financial sustainability?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Good. Yes.
Yeah, because I was going to say economic development's more of a policy than a funding. More than I mean, we fund it, but how much more funding's gonna? So I think that's more of a philosophy. So that's where I'd be with that one. I'm okay that it's underneath it, but yeah.
And to me, when I hear financial sustainability, I'm thinking budget, finance, yeah, tax base. It's not, hey, proactively going out and getting more businesses, restaurants, shops. So, I mean, it can be under financial because it is financial, economics. But to me, it's a separate area.
Well, but let's not lose sight of the fact that what we're talking about is budget priorities, not vision of the city. Do I think that we need good economic development? Yeah. And that's why I said I had a couple of ideas and realized, no, they're policy decisions, they're policy things, not budget. So let's not lose sight of the fact that what we're talking about here is what do we want to see in the budget as opposed to what do we want to see in the city.
So as far as the general priorities, what I have from I'm counting votes and is keep the current 6 and add citizen engagement as a 7th pillar. Economic development would fall under financial sustainability. Transportation infrastructure would fall under the broader umbrella of infrastructure. But we want to make sure we're covering those things and thinking about those things as we budget.
But in alphabetical order.
And put them in alphabetical order. Yes, thank you. I do want to say, these are not in any prioritization order. So,
Reverse
yeah.
alphabetical.
I prefer reverse. Yes, reverse alphabetical order, please.
Zach wants to be first.
Will you go to the next slide then? I'd like to report on what we're doing, what we have in the current budget, and what we're doing under each of these pillars. So under financial sustainability, the current sub-goals under that pillar goal are estimate revenue conservatively, approve a fiscally sound and balanced general fund budget, maintain appropriate reserves, require long-term plans for all funds. We have, in the current budget, we've avoided the temptation to increase our reliance on the sales tax. We've capped our sales tax increase estimates at a we believe to be a reasonable level, and captured any sales tax revenue estimates above that as one-time funding to keep the budget conservative and stable. We watch some neighboring cities that assume that double-digit sales tax increase year over year, and then when it doesn't hit, they're in a bigger hurt. So we have been very conservative in that, and it's made our budget very stable and very strong. This past year, you, as a council, prioritized retiring debt early in the general fund. That was a good move, and it helped us use money to free up more general funds and reduce the property tax increase. We have $17 million in one-time funds that we've transferred to capital projects for infrastructure, and we have 5-year financial plans in much of the budget. Go to the next slide, please. If financial sustainability is going to remain one of the pillars, are there some specific things you want to discuss or talk about under the umbrella of financial sustainability?
I'm going to throw this one out. I'll start. One of the things that we have done poorly at over the last 3 or 4 years, and I think we're now at a point where we can start to do that, is when we get additional growth dollars, that should fund additional growth for the city appropriately. So what I'm saying is, when we get additional funds, we don't throw it at the general operating expense and say, okay, we covered that this year. Additional funds would be additional, when we get the additional values off of property tax or those kind of things, that what we say is, and we start to determine this, how many lane miles do we need before we add an extra snow truck or plow? How many parks do we need, or how much acreage do we have before we add an extra park worker? We expanded this year by 30 acres of parks, therefore we need an extra worker. What I want to be able to do is use the additional revenue that comes from the additional valuation for additional police, additional fire, additional public works, those kind of things, and not look back, not using it to go back and say, oh, we got to cover current costs with that. Additional growth should cover those items that are created by the additional growth. Does that make sense? I think that if we have that kind of plan, that keeps us on a longer term financial stability, because we're acting proactively instead of reactive, because, I mean, face it, for the next few years, unless it depends on what the market does with real estate this year, but the fact of the matter is that over the course of the next 10 or 15 years at least, we're going to have additional growth money, right? Because we've got so much acreage out west that is going to grow, that we need to use that growth and the money that's generated on that growth to keep the city financially stable with the amount of workers the amount of employees and vehicles and fire stations that we need.
So that's kind of what I was going to say in some way. I just want department heads, I hope you're listening, because I want to see those 5-year plans, and I want to see real stuff in there, not just pretend stuff that I've seen before. I want to see 5-year plans. So that means I want to see kind of what Kelvin's saying, that if we're going to have 5 more parks, we need this amount. If we're going to have, we know that from what we've entitled already, we're going to need a new fire and probably a police substation and some water tanks. I want to see all of those in 5-year and beyond plans in the budget, because that's what we need to do. It just, you can't prepare if you don't know what you're preparing for. And So if they're not there, I might even motion to decrease that department's budget because I feel very strongly we need that in order to progress as a city financially, be stable. Thank you.
So that could be reflective in performance measures as well, right? When you're seeing multi-year performance measures side by side, how many parks workers do we have per acre of parks? Or how many lane miles do we have of streets? And then how many streets workers are maintaining those lane miles? I will comment on additional growth and agree completely on property tax, on that property tax growth. I know that that additional growth has also been used in the past and current budgets to fund some of those compensation issues that we have had in the past. So we need to make sure that we're balancing retention and recruitment and compensation with our employees along with the need for additional employees.
Any other thoughts on specifics under financial sustainability? I'm going to go on. Let's go on to the next umbrella. Yep.
I don't know which one this is going to go under, but let me throw something out. This is something that Chris and I, and we talked to you on break a little bit, and maybe this ties into financial stability, but or sustainability. It falls into some discretionary things with the mayor's office. What I'm wondering is that for long-term financial sustainability, does the dumpster program belong in an enterprise fund? We need to ask ourselves what the purpose of the dumpster program is. If it's for citywide beautification, then the people who pay for garbage cans shouldn't be paying for citywide beautification. The city should be paying for citywide beautification. So what I'm suggesting is there a way, and it needs to obviously be long-term financial sustainable, is there a way to move, and I'll back up. We also know that the dumpster program, even with the $50 and the $200, citizens are subsidized, there's somebody subsidizing those amounts. The question is, should the solid waste users be subsidizing those, or should it be the entire city? And I'm going to suggest that maybe for a citywide beautification program, if that's the purpose of the dumpster program, be paid for by citywide funds. Now, I know that may take some juggling, enterprise fund things, a whole lot of other stuff, but and then if you do that, then the council can allocate extra money. Right, there's extra monies like congressional ethics. It's a contradiction in terms, but never mind. But the council could also allocate money that then, when the mayor chooses to through his discretion to pay for a neighborhood beautification project, it's not a fee waiver because it's a citywide beautification project and he's using funds to also pay for citywide, for neighborhood beautification projects that just happen to use a dumpster. And so I think if we take a look at that and get creative, maybe there's a better way, and not having the dumpster program in the enterprise fund, having it a general fund, have it subsidized by the entire city because that's who benefits, and not just a subset of those of us that get garbage cans. And then do some things that the mayor can help with the beautification project with discretionary money. So I don't know if that falls under financial sustainability or if it's not general safety or any of the others, but I'm just going to throw that out here so that we don't miss it as a potential type of way of looking at how we benefit the city and having all of the people in the city pay for it, not just dumpster users.
I don't know, that falls under a goal or just, I mean, you could argue it could go under different goals. It's a very interesting policy discussion for you as a council to have, right? Who should the taxpayers or the ratepayers bear that expense or bear that subsidy? Fascinating policy discussion. Good thing to bring up and something we ought to bring back to the council for further discussion in this budget process.
I think I would probably not put it under financial sustainability, but instead make a discussion topic under city aesthetics.
That would work.
Yeah.
Or fiscally sound.
Okay, let's keep going.
I hadn't thought about city aesthetics, but you may be right. That may be the best discussion place.
Okay, all right, you teed it up nicely, city aesthetics.
That's why she's good.
The current sub goals under city aesthetics is the umbrella are focus on environmental and financial sustainability on aesthetic projects, like water-wise projects, LED street lights, solar, etc. Increase use of water-wise design and continue to identify citywide beautification projects. There's a number of things we have been doing in the current fiscal year in terms of improving the city aesthetics and meeting these sub goals. 4800 South, we just spent a field. Thank you, 4800 West. I say, oh, it says South. That's right. 4800 West feels like a fortune we spent on replacing the trees along 48th West, but that was a big aesthetic improvement in an area that was much needed. We've done some real aesthetic improvement and local scaping projects on Plum Creek Park and other areas. We've made some dramatic improvements in the Highlands Special Improvement District area this year. Maple Hills Park and the completion, that is an awesome park. It's really nice. And the Wheels Park, which is out to bid. Well, it's not out to bid, sorry. Bid's been awarded and it's under design by the team of vendors right now. Okay, go to the next slide if you would. Are there specifics you want to have identified in the FY24 budget under this umbrella?
So I've got two. In the past, we've talked about entrances to the city. Like to keep that there. I'm especially thinking 70th South, right at the hill, where you've got a lot of erosion happening on the north side, and you've got a lot of weed abatement that needs to happen on the south side. The other one kind of ties in with, well, streetlights. I would still love to see us expend more funds for lighting some of our streets that are rather dark. I'd like to see that prioritized.
Actually, you took streetlights out of my mouth as well. That one too, and then continue on the trees and fixing, maintaining, replacing as needed. I was reading a study in Arizona about the lower income neighborhoods without trees had a much higher temperature, both in air and surface, than the ones who had higher end neighborhoods with trees. And so I think it's not just aesthetically pleasing, but I think environmentally it is so much better for our city if we really have trees in our world. So yeah, the trees and lights are my two.
I'm hoping the council will be in favor of this. I don't know if you remember when we first discussed the 9,000 South expansion.
Dang, you know what I was just going to talk about? So good job.
We talked about having a consistent wall there. Well, in the betterments, apparently that didn't occur.
90th South and
From the river bottoms to 1300 West. Apparently in the betterments with UDOT, we didn't do that. So
Did we fund that already? $500,000 in the budget.
only, we didn't fund it for a consistent wall, is my understanding, that anyone that has an existing masonry wall is just going to remain. Am I wrong, Brian? I'm
Okay.
correct. It needs to be a consistent wall. When you have one kind of wall, then another kind, that is not a good entrance to our city. That's one of them. We have 2 freeway entrances that come through our city. That's one of them. So I would hope that in our budget, we would want to put some money in there to ensure that we go through and make the wall consistent. I understand through Public Works that we can't do that via UDOT, that it'll be cheaper for us to just go in and do it. But for me, that's a priority, and I hope in the future that betterments come to our council before it's too late to make it actually a betterment. Because I'm very disappointed on that. I agree, lighting is important.
Down, boy, down.
And Councilmember Bloom's right. Trees they add not only an ecological thing, they add something for your mental health as well and your physical health. So
Can I ask, you said something in between back facing walls on 90th and trees. You said something, I agree.
I
Something.
agree with lighting.
Just lighting.
Lighting,
Thank you.
continue lighting it's important for safety, which our residents want.
Councilmember Worthen.
Apparently my dog's running the dog park. Apologies, I'm just kidding on that. Just a minute, I unmute when that happens. I agree with what everybody's saying, but I also want to make sure that we're staying on track with Veterans Memorial Park and keeping that master plan on task and moving forward and doing what we need to do for that.
Good call. Thank you. Councilmember Green.
Yeah, I've got a little bit of a list. One, trees. I do agree with the trees. Two, I agree with the entrances. I agree wholeheartedly with Councilmember Whitelock on 90th. I wholeheartedly agree with Councilmember McConaughey on 70th, but we forgot one, and that's 7800 South. And what happens, and I'm going to tell you, and we all know this, how many people come to Gardner Village and they don't even know they come to West Jordan? And you have that all the time. We need to work on the entrance to 7800 South. It's welcome to West Jordan. We're historic. We got the Pioneer Hall there. We got Gardner Village. So I don't want to miss out on the opportunities there at 78th. I agree with Council Member Worthen. We need to continue with the Veterans Memorial Park, including adding the sixth flag. I still can't get over the fact that we have a sixth branch of service that the flag looks like Star Trek, but the Star Trek logo, but we need to fix the design in Veterans Memorial Park to include the sixth flagpole. We may need another flagpole and put a POW MIA flag on it or something. The council will have another discussion here next month on a proposed monument near there, so I'll leave that for later. And I think we'd be amiss, and I'm going to throw it under city aesthetics. It may be under something else, but we have to start, and even if it's only just a few $1,000s, we have got to start setting aside funding for the rodeo arena and improvements to the rodeo arena. What we can't do is just keep sweeping the rodeo arena under the rug and then say, oh, whoops, we need $10 million to fix it. What we need to do is start fixing it now. Whatever funds that we can identify, heck, if it's even just $10,000 to start, or something like that, we need to identify things that we can start working on in the rodeo arena to keep making that so that it's a world-class facility that we can use for economic development and those kind of things, because we can bring rodeos and high school rodeos and all those other kinds of things into the city. So those are my thoughts there.
Before we go to Councilmember Pack, we had a work session a while ago about Veterans Memorial Park and the master plan for that, like Councilmember Worthen pointed out. And then we had also talked about the rodeo arena with that. We tried to talk about trying to bootstrap some of the updates to those master plans. Do we want to ask for funding in the budget for moving those along? Seeing some nodding of heads. We'll vote on it formally. I'm not seeing any heads shaking back and forth saying no, but a couple nodding. So that would definitely be a request. Councilmember Pack.
Oh, thank you, Chair. And yes, thank you, Mr. Lee, for the great aesthetic improvement on 4800 West again. And I wholeheartedly agree with what's been mentioned on, if we're going to have an amenity, let's make sure that we can maintain it, whether that's indoors or outdoors. So definitely trees that die, and let's make sure we replace them. And with the lighting initiative, obviously the LED, longer lasting, less power. But if we could remember a dark sky initiative as well, to not have too much ambient light pointed up, if it could be, more focused. I know that there are a lot of proponents of that. And Council Member Green, I've found out that they're not space cadets; they are guardians. Is the name of it? Yeah. So I'm sure that they'll take a little bit of
Star Trek logo, Guardians of the Galaxy from the movie. Yeah.
I'm sure that they'll catch a little bit of flack from there, but they're commissioned out of the Air Force. I found out, and there's a couple hundred of them. So yes, of course, grateful for all branches of government, and that's what I was going to say that I mentioned in our last meeting to go through with the master plan for Veterans Memorial, inclusive of the updating to the monument to our honored veterans of all branches. Thank you.
Councilmember Jacob.
I may have missed it, but Redwood Road too. I mean, Redwood Road aesthetics. We've talked about it several times, but haven't heard that mentioned yet. Can we buy that damn billboard? And then speaking of rodeo grounds and stuff, if we could do something with that big muddy field to the south and west of the rodeo ground, maybe put a building, some kind of box there. I don't know. Never mind.
All right, a little bit of a tangent, going back to the 78 South entrance to the city right by Gardner Village. Could we ask the mayor's office to check into who owns the signage right there? I'm looking at the Salt Lake County parcel viewer, and I'm wondering, is that a Gardner Village sign or is that a city-owned sign?
Billboard.
Yeah.
I think it's Railroad, where their sign is kind of up on the.
But the billboard may be owned by. I bet the billboard's owned by Gardner Village.
Let's visit with you after the meeting on that.
It looks interesting. So that's just kind of a question that was brought up. So continue.
You know what? One other thing, and I don't know if this falls under city aesthetics. Probably does because it's parks. But I think through this budget process over the next few months and getting to the budget, we've got to figure out what we're going to do with the soccer fields. Because if we're going to, let me back up. If the soccer fields are going to cost us so much money to lease and we're not going to be able to pay the amount of money that we think we're going to have to pay, then we've got to start budgeting and allocating money somehow. And probably, I mean, if I remember right, the soccer fields, the leases go through the end of 2024. Is that right? Is it 2025? So that gives us 2 years. That gives us 2 years, and we may have to start setting aside some money now for the architecture for new fields if the old fields aren't going to stay in the city. Or if let me rephrase that, if they're not going to be used for soccer. And so I just think that for that, we need to start setting aside some money to plan and maybe start working on a plan for what we're going to do with the soccer fields.
Any other thoughts under the city aesthetics umbrella? Okay, let's move on to the next pillar. Community safety is the next umbrella goal in the current budget. The sub-goals under that are create long-term public safety facility and staffing plans to support new growth, support safe walking routes in current and new neighborhoods, support pedestrian-friendly roundabouts.
There's no such thing as a.
The current in the current fiscal year, we're working on fulfilling those goals in the following ways. These are things we have done or are doing. Police compensation plans, there was some dramatic change to that to support recruitment and retention. Working on identifying land for additional fire station site on the west side. That's something we're in active negotiations with. There's currently a large CDBG project on Kentucky Drive to improve the sidewalks and gutters in that area, improve the walkability in the Dixie Valley neighborhood. And we have a number of safe sideway projects that are in different phases of design and engineering. So my question to you is, are there other specific goals you'd like to see under the community safety umbrella going into next fiscal year? Will you go to the next slide, please?
first.
Go for it.
And I forget, I have the name written down in the budget book previously, but talking, both police and fire have brought this up on a wish list of looking at some, stoplight emergency things where, where it's safety so they can go through without the risk to the community when they're going through red lights. Yeah, I have it written down in my budget book, but that's, and I don't know what the costs are or anything like that, but just something to look at for possible safety things, because, that's why I think right now.
Councilmember Pack.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just to make sure I'm chiming in just with what residents have mentioned to me. So definitely a proponent of public safety when you're talking about staffing plans, support new growth, making sure, as on a previous slide, it was mentioned that the wages and benefits are competitive so we don't get poached from other cities and we're the place that people want to come work. Along with the safe walking route, when I think of that, I usually think of, the paw prints or other paint that you see on sidewalks. But as Mr. Lee and I have talked about, an increasing number of residents have reached out to me, and some have even sustained injury from raised sidewalks that need to be shaved down. So thank you very much for taking care of that, Mr. Lee. I keep communicating those, as well as we've talked about pedestrian walkways that are somewhat obscure. For instance, on the east side of Copper Hills High, running on Grizzly Way, at the end of streets that are dead end, you have the switchbacks, and now they've been elevated in terms of priority to get plowed or shoveled for snow clearance, because we've had some complaints that have come up in PTA meetings and community council meetings at Copper Hills. So thank you for taking care of the raised sidewalks, the snow shoveling. So to me, it's not just the route that you take, but making sure that, when you're walking on that route, it's plowed and the sidewalks are level, especially if we have elderly or so that they're disabled, ADA compliant. And I don't, because I had to navigate roundabouts, I lived in France for 2 years. Boy, you want to see a roundabout around the Arc de Triomphe, there's a 9-lane roundabout. It's pretty interesting. And every time I think about it, I think National Lampoon's European Vacation, where I can't get left. I can't get out of this. Big Ben Parliament, if you've seen the show. But the reason that I mention that is I know that it's not under our jurisdiction, but if something's not covered in a driver's ed class, like parallel parking or roundabouts navigation, then it's tough. So if we could somehow maybe reach out to the school district, who then could perhaps mention to driver's ed, hey, let's just make sure if we're putting intersections in the city, let's make sure that residents are well able to navigate them. And I love the flashing pedestrian lights too for the crossing. What are those called? My mind.
Hot crossings.
Yes, hot crossing.
Or RFBs at crosswalks, yeah.
Yeah, just to make sure that we're safe. Just in my, 15 years of serving in our schools, there's, one is too many, but there's certainly been more than one fatality or injury. And obviously, budget is a priority, but let's maybe identify the areas where we want to ensure that a little more focus is maintained. Thank you.
I've got a couple of thoughts. One, do we need more officers, or do we need more community support officers? Can those community support officers also maybe drive different vehicles so that West Jordan City has more of an incident management team that runs up and down 90? If the community services officer runs around and they've got a nicer truck like UDOT's incident management, can they help get cars out of the that are broken down or in a wreck off sooner, and those kind of things? Councilmember Pack mentioned the crosswalks. I would like to see make sure that we have enough of those flashing crosswalk signs, particularly in school zones and those kind of things, to slow down. I know that I've had at least one crossing guard reach out to me, but it's just something to think about. I'm not saying that we need to fund money, but right now what we've got is the crossing guards go out and put up a cone. Well, do we need, for the safety of our crossing guards, for the safety of the kids, particularly in some of these higher traffic volume crossings, do we need to have higher, like the attenuator posts that we can stack up and they can put flashing lights on them? Are there things like that we can do to help crosswalks, particularly with schools, safer? And the last one that I'm thinking about is, we've got a new traffic engineer, but what I believe is that when citizens come to us with a petition and say, cars are going too fast down my road, and we tell them, well, it's going to take 2 years to do a traffic study, that's unacceptable to me. What I want to be able to do is have enough funding there that we can go in and drop in a sign that says speed limit 25. I want to be able to drop in some planters in front of the street where it might be a wide street. Drop in a planter that slows people down. Temporary. I'm going to get shot for saying this, but one of the things that works really well in a lot of areas to slow traffic down on a faster street is a mini roundabout, because they come to that and they have to slow to go around it. Well, there are ways to build temporary roundabouts with plastic things. Can we put in temporary speed bumps? I know Councilmember Whitelock was in Memphis, someplace back in Tennessee, and she sent me pictures of Memphis having temporary speed bumps in. Well, we can go put them in and during the summer.
Everywhere they had those.
And you can pull them up during the winter. And are there those kind of things that we can take fast measures to get the traffic slowed down that don't cost a lot of money that we can fund? And so when it comes to community safety, that's where I would like to see us be creative, so that we're not telling citizens, well, sorry, it's going to take 2 years to do a traffic study, and then our only solution is a speed bump or a speed table. The speed tables are the last thing I want to use. I mean, there's lots of things that are allowed with crosswalks and raised crosswalks and planters and separated roads and pop-outs on curbs. And then there's the policy that goes along with that we need to change our street design standards a little bit. But on those kind of things, that's where I'd like to go with some of the things in community safety.
I would be remiss if I did not speak up for the area that I live in and those residents. We need help getting in and out of our neighborhoods. We put in a freeway, and that's great, and that helps the greater community, but it makes the people that I live near more vulnerable. There have been several wrecks. I'd love to see what the log was, because I've seen 2 of them. And sadly, if we are not proactive as a city, UDOT's plan is to wait until the numbers get high enough, which means we got to have a couple people die to get enough numbers. So I think we need to look at that throughout the city, what we can do, and not just sit back and say, well, that's what they said.
And I would agree, we need to figure out a fix for 90th and 48th, or 40th. That's 40th, isn't it? 90th and 40th is one of the worst intersections in the city when it comes to traffic, the way it backs up. And it's the left turn lane that backs up, and then it blocks all the other lanes of traffic, and nobody can move. And we need to figure that one out.
So the mayor and I had a conversation recently about the new traffic engineer, and he has a large list of intersections and streets with issues that he would like to have looked at. He did offer an invitation to the council. If there are specific areas you have, please send them over. I'm going to be submitting probably 7 or 8 specific intersections that have issues, distances between lights where they don't seem to be timed appropriately, streets with speed limits that I kind of have a question on, and a few others. So if any of you have specific issues, please provide them to him and the mayor. the mayor. Please provide them to Mayor Burton and let him know the priority that you feel should go along with that.
You've met very, very briefly our new traffic engineer. He came and introduced himself. We had a traffic engineer and a transportation engineer. Our new traffic engineer is very proactive. He's very good, and we need to bring him back and have him get to know the council a little bit more at some point.
Corbin, do you still have the email that I sent you that was sent to UDOT in conjunction with Kayleen and Jim Madden back when he was mayor?
I do.
About with the buildings?
This is a good reminder, as that has kind of fallen on the wayside as we had no traffic engineer for a period of time. So it's a good one to resurrect. Yeah. Yes. Thank you.
Do you still have those emails, or do you need to forward them to?
I believe I still have them.
Okay, if not, let me know I'll forward them. I did have one other thing as well. I don't know if you guys saw the news story the other day regarding fire hydrants getting buried in the snow. Unfortunately, that can, at least I can tell you mine gets buried in the snow because the city plows, and obviously they're just doing their jobs. It brought up a couple of things. There's no way on a couple of these storms that we've had, and the way things were plowed and the water in the snow, that we could have hand dug that hydrant out. And luckily we have a motor that has a 4-wheeler with a plow on the front of it that can help with that. But it made me think of people that maybe are more elderly than I am. You know, they're not able to do that. I would like to possibly look at where we have fire hydrants, and if to make sure we're not plowing those in and piling snow on top of those. So if there is a situation our firefighters can get to those, that's a much longer discussion, but that might be a funding issue of making sure we get some of our guys over there to make sure those aren't getting buried that way. I mean, simple storms and things like that, that's one thing, but these major storms, yeah, ours got covered, and we had to unbury the thing.
So, Councilmember Worthen, that kind of goes to a brainstorm I was having with Mayor Burton about community engagement, seeing if we can't do something kind of along the lines of Adopt the Storm Drain program, where could be potentially expanded to other city assets like Adopt a Fire Hydrant, and we can have the ability to text people, make sure, hey, it's clear. Then there was a news story about an app that's used somewhere in like Davis County, somewhere up there, where people could say, hey, I need help with this or I need help with that. Perhaps we could give residents the ability to make a request saying, I need help clearing out my fire hydrant or storm drain. Now, those who need help would probably not be the first able to figure out how to use that technology, but those were the kinds of things going along with community engagement that I was hoping that we might be able to take the lead on and find ways to help our residents get involved in taking care of the city, taking care of each other. Our motto's been home of the good neighbor. How can we help our residents get engaged so that we can all be good neighbors? And
yeah, I mean, that's, exactly. I mean, that was that story about that hydrant, and it cost them, 10 minutes? In 10 minutes in a fire? Not a good idea. So I love that, yeah. I mean, because we know where our fire hydrants are, we can locate them, and we can go to the people that live around them and find out, are we even able to dig something like that out? If they're not, do they have neighbors close to them that are? That type of thing. So yeah, 100% behind that.
Thank you. Yeah, I think community safety can be tied with community engagement. Mr. Anderson, on that issues log, could you add traffic concerns?
Yes.
Thank you. Councilmember Green.
You just got me thinking of one, probably falls under community safety, and that would be, we've talked about it a couple of years. I wonder and there are some fairly off-the-shelf type things, but I would love to see an app that people can report things. It does the GIS. I've seen some that are actually fairly inexpensive, that we don't have to develop ourselves, but I'd like to see us think about getting an app. I want to think about, I know we've talked about it, and I know, Mayor, you talked about it, just needs to be somehow funded. I want to make sure that that GIS program that Clint has got running that shows all the snow plows and where the streets are, we need that fully funded. We need that so that citizens can see that, because that will help with safety. That will help with community engagement. And I don't want to miss out on that opportunity. And probably goes more with water-wise conservation, but I'll just throw it out now because we talked about it kind of the other day in the legislative meeting, is I want to see that water app where people can see their water bills that we're beta testing. I would love to see that come full rotation before the summer so that people can, if they want that app, they can better monitor their monitor. And that just came up in the app conversation, but just think about those things.
I'm really torn on that water app. I really like the idea, but it also pointed out to me the need to dig down 5.5 feet to fix my broken stop waste. And that was not fun.
It cost you $3,000 because you recognized the leak?
That was done by hand. That was, that's going to be more in back.
Yeah,
Anyway,
I
sorry.
paid somebody to do mine because it did the same thing.
So, with that squirrel comment, we'll return to Mr. Lee.
Okay, let's go on to the next umbrella. One of the pillars of the budget goals for the council this current year was employee retention and recruitment, specifically being an employer of choice by providing competitive wages and benefits and supporting solutions that enhance employee benefits while creating long-term savings, such as self-funding our insurance, high deductible healthcare plans, and an on-site clinic. In the current fiscal year budget, we're working on employee retention and recruitment with our annual market study for every position in the city. We made adjustments to the police career ladder, firefighter retirement benefits were enhanced. We did not increase our health insurance premiums this year, and we moved our health insurance to a self-funded program. And we are in the process of opening an on-site clinic, which will be opened to our employees this coming July. Well, when the city hall opens, so August, September, we hope. But the on-site clinic provider is under contract, and they are getting ready to build that clinic. So we feel like we're making really good progress in these areas. With that said, what are some specific goals you have under this umbrella?
I don't know that this is a specific goal, but just a thought. I know every time I go to one of your food truck employee luncheon things, the employees are always very grateful. So I hope you keep that in your budget.
Is there anyone that, Councilmember Green?
I was going to say, and I don't know how this works, and so maybe you can better educate the council. When I worked for UDOT, we had, for lack of a better term, was Department of Transportation, so it makes sense. We had these little coupons that were called the Extra Mile Award. And if an employee did above and beyond, another employee or a citizen could fill out this little coupon, Extra Mile Award, and they'd hand it to the employee. The employee would then be able to go to the UDOT store and purchase non-monetary incentives, jackets, shirts, t-shirts, backpacks, whatever. And in a lot of circumstances, those non-monetary awards are more helpful because they promote where you work. You got the West Jordan logo, those kind of things. I will tell you that I didn't even get a chance to go out and stand in the snow during the 2002 Winter Olympics with UDOT because I was stuck with the Utah National Guard in Orem trying to get ready for all the riots that happened during that Olympics. But they gave me the coat, and I still have, 20 years later, the UDOT Olympic jacket with the UDOT logo and the Olympic logo with the bright yellow UDOT stuff in the middle, because it was a good jacket with a lot of meaning. So I think that so my point is let's make sure that we don't forget the food truck things, the non-monetary awards, because a lot of those go even further than giving somebody a few bucks in cash.
Hats off.
We do have hats off awards.
Is there, oh, Councilmember Jacob.
Oh, I was just gonna say, someday the mayor's gonna run out of hats, and then we're gonna have to come up with something else.
That day is very, very far
It's
away.
a few years away if he gives out one a day, but still.
All right. Is there anybody who would alter course? Okay. Sounds like no.
Let's go on to the next umbrella. One of the core pillars of the current budget is infrastructure, specifically supporting long-term and intentional funding for capital improvements and maintenance. We're doing that in the current budget with 21 million in road projects, 6 million in park projects, 10.5 million in facility projects and debt service. We're building a Zone 6 water tank. We're currently under design, hope to go out to construction soon, a major new wastewater line under New Bingham Highway, or rather Copper Hills Parkway, and working on and have implemented 5-year financial plans for infrastructure and
Is there
capital
a fine
projects.
there for using Councilmember Pack, is there some sort of fine for using NBH now? Never mind, I got it.
It's kind of like when you keep writing your checks, well, if anybody does write checks anymore with 2022 on it, right?
You're not writing a check with the wrong, you're not writing a check with the wrong year, you're writing a check in the wrong year. One thing I would like to see added to this list, or at least find out where it's at. We talked a little bit about entrances to the city, 78th South, right by Gardner Village. We have issues with the trail right there, with the Jordan River Trail regularly being submerged. We know that overpass has issues. When you look at the aesthetics of it, Midvale looks pretty nice just up the street. However, right where you hit West Jordan, you get the lovely Jersey barrier, and it just looks terrible. I know I'd heard rumors that it's on a project list somewhere to be replaced and improved, but if that's something that could be examined, I would personally like to see that one. Councilmember Green.
The other thing that I would like to see, whether or not we throw any money at it, and maybe there's some that we can do, but let's make sure that when we pull, and Corbin, I've talked to you about this a little bit, let's make sure we're pulling out master plans, particularly the active transportation master plan, and checking off which ones we've done, and if there's some projects that we can finish with minimal amount of money, let's identify those and check the box off and help get residents with their bang for their buck with some of these small projects that might connect a major trail together or those kind of things. So let's review the active transportation plan, and if we need some funding to go to that to complete some projects, I think at least we ought to look at those and pay attention to those, whether we fully fund them or not, is going to be depending on how much discretionary money, but at least we ought to know what we're doing with those and where we're at.
And are we talking primarily general fund infrastructure, or are we also expecting to see like stormwater?
Most infrastructure is in one of the enterprise funds or Class C road fund issues, right? Roads, water, wastewater, stormwater.
Yeah, based on what we saw with the storms in August, with all the storm water, I definitely want to make sure that there are considerations, given we talked a little bit in a separate venue about the retention pool, dam, whatever it is that we have over there, and some of the parks that were anticipated nearby. If there's something that we need to consider there, I'd love to see that. Anyone else have something to add for infrastructure? If not, we can go back to number of seats in the theater.
Make sure, Councilwoman Worthen, are we missing you? Okay, let's go on.
Oh, sorry, I was trying to unmute. I miss you guys too, thanks.
The sixth pillar in the current budget is process improvements, specifically supporting technology solutions and upgrades and supporting programs that identify efficiency and promote process improvements. We're working on that in the current budget, and these have different levels of implementation, but we're currently implementing CityWorks in the Community Development Department and elsewhere. In the current budget, we separated the Development Services Fund as its own fund. We are working on a network redesign in the IT system. We're moving to expand Invoice Cloud and its services to move more of our processes and accounts online. Prosecution has been ongoing, but they're working on upgrading software processes. We have invested heavily in cybersecurity in the last year. And in this part of the City Hall remodel, we're working constantly on thinking about, all right, how do we improve the efficiency of the building and the efficiency of the staff and resident processes within the building? How do we get the things the residents want most closest to the front door and easiest to access, those kinds of things. Okay, we go to the next slide.
Real quick with this, is there something in there that covers automation of business license renewal, so I can do 100% of that online, or pet license renewal without having to physically come in and show certificates?
And not mail everything out.
Let's add those to the current budget, or to the 2024 budget. City business license, that's under the CityWorks one. That's being improved as part of the CityWorks implementation. Pet licensing is not, we're not on our current radar at the moment, so let's make sure we add that.
Yeah, because I've been out, and there's some pretty easy pet licensing software that,
I forgot to put it on there. We have implemented a pet licensing software called Chameleon.
cool.
Ours are due for renewal in February, so
So we'll test that.
awesome.
We'll see how that
And this, and I know we've had this policy discussion, but we need to maybe just go back and, I don't want to revisit it, but somehow take a look at it. Do chickens really belong to the business licensing department? And they, the chickens and the ducks and the whatever, dang it, they're pets. They need to go to animal control, and if there's some money that needs to shift through there, let's take a look at that, because it doesn't make, it made no sense to me. I'm just gonna tell you, it made no sense to
You
me.
know how much money eggs are currently? That's a business.
If you've got a chicken, you're going to be able to pay cash for your
Well,
Victorian place. up
you
in
know
the
what? I got rid of my chickens, and they, at the height of the chickens, I was getting 5 eggs a day, and now I wish I had the chickens because of the cost of them. But it doesn't make sense to get a license mailed out to you from the business license department saying you've got chickens, and you're trying to figure out how to. It's just a confusing process, and so as we talk about process improvement, is there a way to simplify that? Does Chameleon allow to adopt for chickens? Can we transfer that off? You know where I'm going with this, and if it's a one-time fund to transfer, maybe we need to take a look at that. If we don't have the money, we can delay it, but we know where we're going with that, because that's just crazy.
So both pets and poultry added to the radar. And Councilmember Bloom.
Chris, this is for you. Is there stuff that we need to be on our radar to help you with economic development and the process improvements?
Nothing that we're not actively engaged
Okay.
departmentally right now.
For
I just
those
wanted to make
listening
sure that
at-
was on the radar.
For those listening at home who couldn't hear his response, he said nothing that's not already being actively worked on.
And I heard that Greg Davenport wants all the money in the world for the Public Utilities Department.
That helps economic development too.
All right. Anything to add on process improvement?
Okay, that's it as far as the 6 current fiscal year umbrella budgets. However, at the start of this session, we did say we're going to add a 7th of citizen engagement. Are there some specifics you'd like to discuss as far as sub-goals under citizen engagement? We talked about at the start, we talked about events, we talked about communications, we talked about outreach, youth council. Are there others?
I'm just gonna reiterate, I think we need to look at the Cinco de Mayo type thing. We need to make sure that we're integrating the minority communities into activities that we can celebrate. I'm thinking just off the top of my head, Cinco de Mayo, Juneteenth, couple, and then there are probably, there's a couple
Right.
others out there that I have missed, but I think that we need to look at, doing more of that with the populations, particularly with the change in demographics and those kind of things, and be able to do that better. That's one thought anyway.
Councilmember Bloom, and then I thought I saw a blip on the light from Councilmember Jacob.
I would love to see the expansion of entertainment during Western Stampede. The ROI of bringing residents in, to me, would be absolutely worth it. And then along the lines of events, like things like some sort of pride thing as well, in addition to those in our minority neighborhood or residents.
Yeah, I said pride when Kelvin was going through his list of diversity things. Something we could do something there. Salt Lake does a big hullabaloo. We could piggyback on it somehow. But I was just thinking the diversity committee should be able to be a good resource for that. Let's quickly in short order ask the diversity committee what are we missing, and let instead of 7 white guys saying this is how we need to celebrate minorities, let's 7 white people. Sorry, that was a little more.
I don't know. I think I'm 90% Hispanic based on what my wife tells me. 'Cause
Based
she's
on my
beat it.
diet, I am, but that's another thing.
How many of you
I
celebrated
love
Three
tacos.
Kings Day this year? Never mind, I'm not going there.
So there are a couple thoughts running through my mind with citizen engagement. I shared one, kind of going back to the idea of adopt a storm drain, adopt a fire hydrant, giving citizens some way that we can help connect citizens with the opportunity to serve each other. But at a higher level, I think most of my thoughts and ideas are somewhat disjointed, and I would really like to see a cohesive city plan for citizen engagement. This is something that's not really one department. It's not just events, it's not just communications, but how are we getting information out? How do we engage with citizens when they pay? How do we engage with citizens when they apply for a permit, when they have a business license, when they want to serve on a city committee? It's something that crosses a lot of different areas. And I think if we were to start seeing something put down in writing, we could better figure out how we want to address finances there. So since this is something brand new, I think the first step would really be trying to put together and develop a city plan for citizen engagement. And I'm sure the council will want to be involved with that, but a framework or something from the mayor's office to help us build on, I think would help pull the vision together a little quicker. Okay.
Can I ask, maybe opening a can of worms, but last budget process, rather late in the budget process, there was quite an animated discussion about public art. Is that fall under one of your council priorities, one of these goals?
I think it would fall under aesthetics, yeah, absolutely, and community engagement, both. Yep.
We need to take a look at that, I agree.
Yeah, I said my piece in
Thanks
the
for
budget process
remembering
and I
that.
forgot.
Flashing back to mural conversations.
On restaurant walls, what's a sign, yeah, I remember that.
We drafted a great ordinance and then we kind of dropped.
Do you need anything further on that?
Okay, no, nothing further. Cassie, will you go to the next slide? I think, is there anything else you want? Denise and I, the budget committee, we're quite sensitive to not try to steer this conversation, but to make sure it was council driven. this is my moment to ask you, what do you want? Did you feel steered? And were there areas of the conversation that we needed to spend more time on that we didn't?
I want to ensure that the council has access to an attorney. And if that means that we have to have our own attorney, it's unacceptable to me that we had a community group come in and complain and we still don't have a couple of lines in code that are back to us because I don't know why. If it's shortage of attorneys, if it's just, my experience has been in the past with another organization that when it was not our attorney, we got different counsel and it took longer. We got our own attorney, we got quicker work and different counsel. So for me, a budget consideration is that somehow we have a dedicated attorney, at least for some hours, that are just dedicated to council work that are our priorities that we've asked for, not have it be put in the work stream. That, whether that's a full-time accountant, it's a part-time accountant, it's a shared accountant, not accountant, lawyer. Somehow, I strongly feel that this council needs legal that is dedicated to us.
I'm going to agree with that. Given, I'm still mad at you. I love that you're going, but I'm still mad at you.
I love that he's going, I love the reasons.
Oh, well, okay. But given the changes that we're going through, let's scrutinize the budget closely. Let's see if we can't hire three for the price of two plus a little bit more. And we dedicate, I agree with Kayleen, we've got to dedicate at least an attorney with at least 20 hours a week to the council. If there's, and then if they do 20 hours a week, there's obviously other things that are easily done that aren't client specific, things like grandma requests or those kind of things. They don't have to be involved in litigation or those kind of things, but we've got to, I agree with her, we've got to do something.
Along those lines, I'm going to be a little bit hesitant to add staff for what would be considered overhead unless there's really good justification for it. I'm very curious to see if we're tracking total number of hours worked by the attorney's office, how many of those hours are going to the council and where with the council things. Because I'm sure the council is using some hours. I'd like to know how many hours we're using, and I'd like to see how many we need to be using so we can see what size of deficit it is, whether it's we need 20 hours, we need a full-time person, we need 17 attorneys just for the council. I'd be really curious to see where we're at.
Yeah, and I wouldn't support adding that specific of a request until we have an actual accurate picture of exactly what the need is. I don't feel I have that. I don't know where we've fallen short over the last year with last 2 years, 3 years that we've had, a council and a mayor with different staff. I don't know what we're missing out on, so I need a better picture of exactly why we would need to do that. And I don't want to hire three for the price of two, because then you get 2/3 of a lawyer 3 times, and it's not doesn't add up very well, and you don't get good ones. So I'd rather pay well for quality.
I know we're all kind of chiming in. I want to make sure there's a chance for our Councilmember Worthen, if you have any items that haven't been touched on as part of the budget that you think should be considered. Just want to make sure there's a good break in the conversation to give Councilmember Worthen a chance to chime in.
No, I said what I needed to say. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm not seeing any other lights.
I'll be glad to get out of the hot seat. Thank you.
All right, so that's what,
Chair, I'd like to make a motion.
I'm probably going to second it because I know what you want.
you're not, we still have proposed amendments to council policies and procedures.
I'm moving that we adjourn.
And I'm going to second it.
Motion and a second. Any discussion to the motion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We'll stand adjourned.
They're out of